Yes. This is Scott Mayo. This is the third session of my presentation, using a room in a library here. And I'm going to talk for a few moments about the flags in my life and how we associate. Well, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Now, this is, of course, you recognize this flag. This is the flag that I grew up with. You know, I was talking about how patriotic the South is. I'm not kidding. You know, my father was a proud Southern American. My father told me about my Confederate ancestors and all that, but, you know, it wasn't about the Confederate States, it was about the United States. His father before him. You know, I was growing up and a kid, man, I'll tell you what. You see these every time, 4th of July, every holiday, Veterans Day, we'd always put out the flag. The United States flag. We just call, of course, just the American flag. In fact, I didn't even start calling this the U.S. flag until this nonsense with the Confederate flag, removing it and all started. I had to distinguish it. Grew up putting this one out. 4th of July and Veterans Day, every holiday, we put out the flag. And this is not the one that I used and grew up in. This is my late maternal grandparents' flag. And I use this at my house, my late grandparents' paternal grandparents' house, actually. And after 9/11, I put this flag up every single day for a month after the 9/11 attacks. I tell you what, you're talking about seeing patriotic, more Southerners have never been as patriotic as they have been since 9/11. Like I said, sometimes it's just downright ridiculous. But boy, they're patriotic. They're not about the Confederate States and the United States. See, we care about the United States more than any other part of this country. At least we, you know, stand by it. See, I can't emphasize that enough. We don't seek to resurrect the Confederate States of America or to secede from the United States. We're just proud Southern Americans, and that's all. Most of us. Just proud Southern Americans. It has nothing to do with race or anything like that. Anyway, I put this flag outside my house after the Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart. I'd seen on television Challenger break apart, and I put this up after the Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart because, you know, yeah, these were astronauts. They weren't exactly soldiers, but they represented the United States, and in fact, they actually represented the world. And these people died in a horrible way in the Space Shuttle Columbia. See, put it after that. Even after I heard that Osama bin Laden had finally been killed, I put it out. And it wasn't so much, to celebrate that Osama bin Laden had been killed. No, what it was is to show honor, or rather, to those people, to the victims of the 9/11 attacks. See, this was some closure for them. It was a long time in coming, but some closure for them, at least hopefully, when Osama bin Laden, the mastermind, at least believed to be the mastermind behind these attacks, was killed. Put it out on Veterans Day to honor veterans. Now, last 4th of July, I didn't put this out. You know why? Because I couldn't put it out at half staff, see. You know, after this crazy stuff with this censoring the Confederate flag, and then, you know, after the next day after the mayor of Pensacola removed that flag here in Pensacola, then I find out the Supreme Court decision, forcing a redefinition of marriage on the entire nation. I didn't feel like celebrating the 4th of July. I couldn't fly this flag at half-mast, so I didn't fly a flag. And then last Veterans Day, though, again, I did. And it wasn't so much to celebrate anything. It was just to show honor to veterans of the United States troops. But you know, flags, we have all these associations with them. Now, generally speaking, when I see this flag, I have positive associations. I mean, this is the flag of my country. This is the flag of the United States. But there are, of course, Native Americans who have mixed feelings, at least, about this flag. I mean, just face it, in what is now the United States, you know, talk about what was done by to the Native Americans by the Spanish, the French, and the British. That was a lot, but in what's now the United States, actually more harm was done to the Native Americans by the United States government. So they have mixed feelings about it. Some of them just don't have really, you know, understandably. In fact, a lot of Native Americans fought on the side of the 13 colonies in the American Revolution because they thought this new government of the people, by the people, and for the people would include them, see. They thought that this new government would treat them better than the British government did. And it ended up treating them worse. And then, of course, with this global war on terror, which is, the worst thing about this global war on terror, there are no parameters to this thing. There are no rules of engagement. This is not like any war this country's ever been involved in. I mean, there's no limit, there's no end, there are no definitions of winning, there's no plan for winning, nothing. And people are dying at the hands of United States forces. Now, of course, in most cases, accidentally, there's collateral damage. But civilians are still dying. Bombings, by the U.S. military. Now, we're not, are the troops to blame? No, of course not. It's really, if anything, it's the federal government that just keeps this war going on. Now, President George W. Bush really started it, but Obama's perpetuating it. He's keeping the troops in Afghanistan. When's this going to end? But anyway, the bottom line is people are dying. It's just civilians in these bombings. I'm sure they don't have much love for this flag. In fact, I think this flag scares them to death, see. So we can have all these associations with this flag, positive and negative. But what does this flag really say? What does this flag say? This flag only says one thing. This is the United States of America. That is all this flag actually says. This is the United States of America. This is the United States of America. That is all it says. All these associations we have with it, all these things, what it means to us, all it actually says is, this is the United States of America. But because this flag is a piece of cloth that says something, a piece of cloth that speaks, it is representative of speech itself. Thus, an infringement on this flag is an infringement on our right to freedom of speech. This next flag you've seen before, Confederate battle flag. I've described before how I got this at Spencer Gifts in Bel Air Mall. They've even removed the Dukes of Hazzard from television, because the General Lee, all because of the General Lee. The General Lee, this car in the Dukes of Hazzard show I watched when I was a kid, has the Confederate battle flag on the top, and they've completely removed that show from television. Just because of that flag. And that's all, on top of that car. They no longer show reruns of the... It's just insane. There was even a rap song back in the late 80s or early 90s, the Daisy Dukes. Now see, these are black, rappers. They sing this song. I don't remember which group it was or which singer, but your Daisy Dukes. They watched, these black Southerners, Americans, they watched the Dukes of Hazzard too. They never thought about that Confederate flag. It never bothered them. Daisy Dukes, they're talking about get your Daisy Dukes on, and talking about these little short shorts that Daisy Duke in the show wears. You get your Daisy Dukes on, a rap, you know. See? And of course, this was just a cool thing to have. Like I said before, I had a T-shirt with a Confederate battle flag on it when I was a kid, but you know, I had a Jaws T-shirt, with the poster from the movie on. I had a Close Encounters of the Third Kind T-shirt, picture from the movie, So for me, for a kid, part of it was Southern, just I'm a proud Southerner, but most of it for me as a kid, it was just something cool. I even saw a black man one time up near Auburn University where I first went, on a bus. I was getting off a bus, and this man here, he had this black man, he had a Confederate battle flag cap, and his friends were standing around him. He was an older black man, wasn't racist to him. And we're talking about associations here. Is this flag racist? Well, is this one? So you could call any flag racist. But what you've got is you've got people in this country just automatically say this flag is racist, and they have no idea. They have no idea of even the history of this flag. They're just told that by the politically correct mass media, told that by Facebook, all this. But, really, this flag is no more racist than any other flag. Sure, some people might see it as racist. But you could see the flag of the United States is racist too. See? Every flag. See? And of course, now for the Ku Klux Klan, they took on this flag, The segregationists back in the 60s, they took on that flag to represent them. But to represent them, but did this flag represent them? No. See, they used this flag to represent them, but did this flag actually represent them? No more than the swastika represented the Nazis in Germany. The swastika, an ancient Hindu symbol, basically about peace. They just took it to represent them, but it's like I say, you go into India today, you will see swastikas. They have nothing to do with the Nazi German regime. These are devout Hindus. Do you blame a symbol? Do you blame an emblem because it's misused? How is that fair? See, how is it fair to blame this flag because that was designed in 1861 for misuse of it 100 years later? How is that fair? See, that's not fair. But to most Southern Americans, this is just a flag, just proud Southerners, proud Southern heritage. And it goes along with this flag, see. We're proud Southern Americans, see. We're proud Southern Americans. They go together. We have all these associations with this flag, this Confederate battle flag, positive and negative. But what does this flag say? It only says one thing. This is the Confederate side of the battlefield. That's all it says. That's all it was ever designed to say. That's all it really says. What it says is not even relevant anymore. What this flag has to say has actually been irrelevant for over 150 years. This is the Confederate side of the battlefield. Confederate troops stay here. Union troops stay there. That's all it says. This is the Confederate side of the battlefield. Nevertheless, because this flag is a piece of cloth that says something, because this flag is a piece of cloth that speaks, this flag is representative of speech itself. Thus, this flag, thus an infringement on this flag is an infringement on our right to freedom of speech. Now, how about a trick question? It's very hot in this room. My air conditioner's not up high enough. That's why I'm sweating. What does this flag say? Odds are you don't know. Odds are if you're an American citizen, you've seen this flag before, but you don't know where. I purchased this flag many years ago. And so, of course, not knowing even what this flag says, what this flag exactly is, you really don't have any associations, negative or positive, about this flag, do you? Not likely, see. This is the flag of the Palestinian people. I purchased this flag many years ago, many years after I discovered the truth about the modern state of Israel and the Palestinian struggle for independence. See, to the Israeli government, this flag represents a threat, because these are, for all practical purposes, the native people whose land the Israelis took. It's not the other way around. See? To the Palestinian people, of course, this flag represents hope. This flag represents a possible future Palestinian state, recognized Palestinian nation. To me, this flag represents something I stand for, even though it doesn't directly affect me. I'm not an Arab. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not even a native of occupied Palestine. Nevertheless, it's something I strongly believe in. See, it's important to me. So it represents something I stand for. It matters to me, even when it's not a popular thing, at least in this part of the United States, to stand for. But what does this flag actually say? All these associations with this flag, what does this flag actually say? This flag says, this is Palestine. This is the nation of Palestine, whether you recognize it as a nation or not. This is the flag of we, speaking in terms of the Palestinian people. This is the flag that represents us, the Palestinian people, whether you acknowledge our existence or not. That's all this flag says. This is Palestine. But because this flag is a piece of cloth that says something, a piece of cloth that speaks, this flag is representative of speech itself. Thus, an infringement on this flag is an infringement on our right to freedom of speech. And finally, this flag. Now, odds are, before you saw the first part of my presentation, you didn't know what this flag even meant. That was the thing that surprised me. I thought when I first started wearing this flag on t-shirts like this, people would even know what it was in Pensacola, Florida. This flag that had actually been censored from the 5 flags displayed there. Pensacolians' 5 flags displays. You didn't seem to know what it was. I found that very disturbing and still do. You don't even know when a flag has been removed from a historical display in your city? And you don't even know what it is? That's sad. This is the first Confederate flag, the stars and bars. This was the flag. Yeah, I never thought that I would actually feel a need to purchase one of these flags, because I never thought anything crazy as this would happen. That some kid, mindless, misplaced, just full of mindless, misplaced rage, would go into a church and kill 9 people because they were of a different race than his, and yet nothing would be done, taking advantage of loopholes in the gun laws in South Carolina, and yet nothing would be done to close those loopholes at all, to keep bastards like him from getting a hold of a flag. But all of a sudden, all these Southern Americans would just go insane because they'd see a Confederate battle flag actually on his website. And so not only they go after the Confederate battle flag, but they go after any design of a Confederate flag. Any design. And so, when this happened and I found out that Walmart suddenly stopped selling any design of the Confederate flag, Amazon had stopped selling it. Boy, I got nervous. So I contacted this company from which I'd got this Palestinian flag and asked them, do you have any first Confederate? I didn't need a battle flag. I already had one. Do you have any first Confederate flags left? After this mayor of Pensacola removed this one, which had replaced the battle flag and the 5 flags displays in 2000, because the battle flag had negative associations. Undeserved, but never negative. And because this flag more accurately represented the Confederate States of America than the battle flag anyway, because this was actually an official flag hung over the Capitol, first in Montgomery and later in Virginia, of the Confederate States. And they said, not too many. They said what happened was this company, they're not making them anymore in the United States. The producers have stopped making these flags in the United States. And see, I wanted to get, as I said before, I wanted to get one made in the USA, because my country was the United States of America, not the Confederate States. I wanted to get one made in the United States. So I got 2 of them, and this is one. I just wish I would have gotten more. Now, no more are available, except foreign-made flags. And, that's better than nothing, but I especially would rather have one of these. But, so this first Confederate flag, you don't even know what it is. You really don't have any associations with it, do you? See, this flag represents to me. It represents, of course, the Confederate States of America in the official sense. And one reason I like this actual version of the Confederate flag the most is because it so resembles the flag of the United States. Ironic, isn't it? Hardliners in the Confederacy decided, to change this flag because they said, well, it looks too much like the flag of the United States. So they came up with this other design. But that's exactly one reason I like it so much. See, it looks so much like the flag of the United States, and yet it's the flag of the Confederate States. See, in other words, it's a flag of being a Southern American. See, a Southern American. And again, of course, it doesn't have anything to do, the interesting thing is, if you didn't know what this flag was, and then I told you, well, this was the first flag of the Confederate States, you automatically think, well, that means it's racist, right? Because the Confederate States of America was racist. Well, was it? Yeah, slavery was practiced in the Confederate States of America, but slavery was also practiced in the United States of America. Slavery was practiced by the British, by the Spanish, by the French. And not only that, Spain and France and Britain were really pretty bad toward the Native Americans as well. And the United States was really bad too. The Confederate States was generally pretty tolerant of, in fact, of Native Americans. In fact, there were actually some Cherokees in particular who supported it because it treated them better than the United States did, or rather had. There was actually a Confederate general, Stand Watie, if I'm not mistaken. He was a Cherokee. And these weren't pro-slavery anything, no. It's just the Confederate States treated Native Americans a little bit better, not completely, but a little bit better than the United States did. So was the Confederate States of America racist? No more than the United States of America. Is the United States of America racist? No, not really, in my opinion. Is France racist? No, not really. Is Britain racist? No, not really. Is Spain really just racist? No. Just to say any of these, this is just racist because some policy that you don't approve of. You might as well say every country in the world. You might as is Canada racist? Is Argentina racist? Is South Africa racist? I mean, now after apartheid, no. Is Uganda racist? Is Cameroon racist? Is Libya racist? Is China racist? Is Malaysia racist? Is Indonesia racist? Is Japan racist? Is Switzerland racist? Is Norway racist? Is Sweden racist? Is Australia racist? So you could say any country's racist. Arguably, yeah. But what does this flag say? I have a positive. This flag also, to me, represents standing up for something. In a way, it's kind of similar to the flag of Palestine that I have there. It's something that I stand for. I'm standing actually against censorship. Standing against government-imposed censorship of American history. Not to mention Pensacola history. Censorship. Government-imposed censorship. Local, state government, what difference does it make? It's still government-imposed censorship. So this represents a cause, just like the Palestinian flag, that I stand for. Something I stand for, which is really against government-imposed censorship. But what does this flag say? What does this flag actually say? This flag says, "This is the Confederate States of America." That's all it says. Now, it's not exactly relevant anymore, is it? Confederate States of America was defeated 150 years ago, although, you know, now local, state and local governments all over the American South are posthumously exterminating the Confederate States of America. In other words, as if the Confederate States of America was a human being buried, and it's like they're just digging up this person and just this body and just burning it, incinerating it, so there's no trace of it remaining, and removing the marker from the grave. See, that's what they're doing. But this flag, all it says is, "This is the Confederate States of America." That is all it actually says. Whatever connotations we have about it, that's all it says. This is the Confederate States of America. But because this flag is a piece of cloth that says something, a piece of cloth that speaks, this flag is representative of speech itself. Thus, an infringement on this flag is an infringement on our right to freedom of speech. Now, we want to talk about, I took speaking in high school and actually discovered, I have two big talents, and I discovered them late in life. One is public speaking. I didn't discover that until I was a junior in high school. And I at Murphy High School in Mobile. And I just took speech class, elective, and found out I had almost no fear of public speaking, first of all, which is very unusual. And then I was pretty good at it too. Ended up entering contests, ended up speaking at graduation. And the other, I discovered this gift of public speaking. The other gift that I have is for creative writing. I didn't discover that till years later, several years later, as a student at the University of South Alabama. And I just took this class in fiction writing. And just on a lark, I was actually, my major was communication at the time. My minor was English, but I thought, well, this looks interesting, fiction writing. So I took this class in fiction writing. And I discovered I was good at this, That was the second. But one thing is, I mentioned that of public speaking, there are rules that go with public speaking. You're never supposed to say, I'm going to do this now, or I'm going to do that. You're not even supposed to thank your audience. You're not even supposed to apologize for any mistake you make. But rules are made to be broken, as they say, right? Let me take a look, or rather show you, some of the materials I've used for this presentation that I've learned from. This is going to be kind of tricky because I'm actually nearsighted, and which means that I have to wear these glasses for distance vision. But to read, I have to take them off. So it would be a little bit easier probably if it were the other way around. Most people with vision problems, they're farsighted. They have to wear glasses to read and everything, but the distance vision is fine. So kind of go back and forth here. About these materials that I used. I'm going to tell you what, it's hotter in this room than it was in the presentation, you know, outside when I did those presentations there in the outdoors. It is hot in here. Let me talk about some materials, and let me mention this one. And now this here, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because that's not the main purpose of this. But this book here, Against Our Better Judgment. Now, see, this isn't about the Confederate States. This is about the Palestinian situation. Now, I'll tell you how I found out about that. Let me sit down for this. I'll tell you how I found out about that was this. Many years ago, when I was a student at the University of South Alabama, I had some friends who, I was still a Christian, and I believed in Jesus Christ at this time. I had some friends from my apartment complex across the campus from the University of South Alabama. I had friends literally from all over the world. And of course, I've always been, all my life, I've been just fascinated with foreign people, foreign cultures, foreign things. So, I'm actually drawn to these things. And so I had friends from Thailand. I had friends from, I had a friend from Sri Lanka. I had a friend from Bolivia. Actually, a roommate from Bolivia one time. Had friends from, but I especially had, one time I was living in this apartment complex, friends from Bangladesh, mostly from Bangladesh and some from Pakistan. Now, Bangladesh and Pakistan are both predominantly Muslim countries. These were the first Muslims I'd ever met in my life. I knew nothing about Islam, nothing. They taught me so much about it that I didn't even know. One thing they taught me really surprised me was that Jesus, is actually considered a prophet by Muslims. Muslims consider, they don't believe that Jesus was the incarnation of God and that he was sacrificed for the sins of humanity, but they do consider Jesus to have been one of God's prophets, just as they consider Moses to be. They have great reverence for the prophet Jesus. The only thing is with Muslims, Muslims consider Muhammad to be the last prophet. See, and that's why Muhammad is the primary prophet. But not the only one. See. Another thing that surprised me that they told me was that Muslims, according to Islam, Jews and Christians are considered people of the book. These are the spiritual descendants of Abraham. And Abraham is really considered the ultimate founder of all three of the Western faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. See? And while Christians believe that there's only one way to God, and that's by being Christian. You have to be Christian in other words, you have to be Christian. You have to believe in Jesus Christ as the incarnation of God. That was sacrificed for the sins of humanity. You have to be Christian. You have to believe this in order to go to heaven. If you don't believe this, too bad. You're going to hell. In other words, if you're not Christian, people of every other religion are going to hell, except Christians. I've always had a problem with that. I was raised Christian, but I really always had a problem with that. Christianity is the only major religion that has this clause, basically, where no other religion is accepted as legitimate at all. And so, but what they taught me was that in Islam, devout Christians, sincere, devout Christians, they will go to heaven too. And so will sincere, devout Jews, as well as sincere, devout Muslims. That was surprising to me. I found out later, if I'm not mistaken, my understanding, as far as Judaism is the same way. Most Jews consider Islam and Christianity to be legitimate faiths in the same way. But they taught me a lot of things. And I have many friends from Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is not an Arab country. It's these people, the Indian subcontinent, you know. In fact, actually, you'd be surprised to know, maybe, the country with the largest population of Muslims is Indonesia. Indonesians are not only are they not Arab, they're of a different race than the Arabs. They're Mongoloid race. These are the people of East Asia. See? But that's the largest population of Muslims is actually in Indonesia. And so that's really, there's a lot more to this than we think. But anyway, I had this friend named Omar, and among one of these, and one day I went to visit him and his roommates in his apartment. These people from Bangladesh, they're lucky if they have enough money to even come to the United States to study. Bangladesh is an extremely poor country. But even when they do, they have to have as many, roommates to a room as they can, because it's very expensive for them. And they were just watching the evening news. And there was something on there about the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it was the same old thing, you saw these Palestinians throwing rocks at night. You didn't see much from the Israeli side, but you saw these Palestinians, and they were just talking about that. And I just kind of made this comment. Maybe I'd heard it from parents. I don't know. I just looked at it. One side's just as bad as the other, And one of Omar's two roommates stood up and he said, "Get out of my apartment." And this really surprised me, I thought it was really strange. I was really more puzzled than offended. What do I say? I looked at Omar, my friend Omar, and he just didn't say anything. Just kind of, I looked at his other roommate. He didn't say anything either. So I looked back at this other roommate. I said, "Well, it's your apartment," and I left. But as I left, I wasn't offended. Why should I be? Obviously, I had said something that offended this young man. These were not Arabs. Why should he offend them? It occurred to me. They were Muslims, but they weren't Arabs. And they never said anything about it. We continued being friends with Omar and his roommates. They just never brought it up again. Neither did I. What was the point? But I wondered about this for years. I even attended, once I would come to the realization that I simply was not Christian, and I don't believe, I even attended a Reformed Jewish temple in Mobile. I was considering converting to Judaism. I came to the conclusion that the two religions which most resembled my faith were Islam and Judaism, because they're really monotheistic, and really, in my opinion, of course, much more monotheistic than Christianity actually is. It's just one God and that's it. There's no three in one. It's just one God. There wasn't really a mosque in Mobile or anything like that. I had attended a Muslim worship service with these Bangladeshis one time, seen that, but there was, as far as I knew, no mosque in Mobile, but there was this Reformed Jewish temple. I spoke with a rabbi about converting, and he said, "Should I just come?" So I visited this Reformed Jewish temple, the worship services there for about a year. After about a year, I finally came to the conclusion that though these people were friendly and nice, it just seemed from the attitude of the rabbi that I would never be considered Jewish unless I was born Jewish. See, Judaism is the only major religion in the world that's actually tied directly to your ancestry. And most Jews really, and you know, it's strange because Christianity is forcibly inclusive. Well, you must become Christian. You can be Christian. You know, anybody is welcome to convert to Christianity, but not only that, you must convert or you're going to hell. So it's forcibly inclusive, Christianity is. Judaism is the opposite. It's exclusive. It's an exclusive religion. And what I found at this time, people were there, were kind and everything like that, but I came to the realization that, you know, I would never be accepted as a Jew because I had never, you know, no matter what I did, and convert, because I wasn't born Jewish. My ancestry, see, it's directly tied to ancestry. That's not the case with Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism or any other religion in the world. It doesn't matter what your ancestry or ethnic background is with any other religion except Judaism. Every religion has a flaw, and that's the primary flaw with Judaism, in my opinion. Just as, of course, the primary flaw, as mentioned, with Christianity is that it's, you know, it considers itself the only legitimate religion at all. See? But one day, almost 10 years after this incident, in which this, you know, I obviously had said, well, one side is just as bad as the other, I wondered about that. I moved here to Pensacola. And so I just looked in this, you know, I wonder, why did what I said offend that guy so much? One side just as bad as the other. I had this desktop encyclopedia, just, you know, three little volumes that I'd gotten at a flea market. This was just common knowledge that it had come, I believe, with a subscription to Time magazine. It was Concord desk encyclopedia. And I looked under the heading Israel, and I especially looked under the heading Palestine. And I was absolutely shocked. You see, I thought the same thing most other people thought. I thought the Israel of today was the Israel of biblical times. That, you know, the Jews had never left Palestine. They'd just always been there. What I found instead was that most of the Jews in Palestine left after the failed Jewish revolt in AD 70. Now, this was a revolt against, it was led by Jews, led by Shimon Bar Kokhba, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, at Masada. And this was a Jewish revolt. In fact, there's a passage in which Jesus, you know, a lot of Christians think that Jesus is talking about the end of the world, but what I was taught at Mobile Christian School was actually, he's not talking about the end of the world, he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem. See? At least in most of that passage. But this Jewish revolt, if I'm not mistaken, began in AD 67, 68. And the Romans finally crushed it. There was another revolt going on. If I'm not mistaken, it was by the Basques in Spain. And that was Roman territory too. So you had two revolts going on. And the Romans finally crushed this Jewish revolt. Now, I'll be honest with you, I wish the Jews would have won. I wish anybody would have defeated the Roman Empire at all. The Romans were horrible. The Roman Empire was just unbelievable, you know. The Roman Empire was just, in my opinion, the most brutal empire that's ever existed, the most oppressive ever. Some would argue that the British Empire was. Well, maybe, but You know, the British Empire, they didn't crucify people. You Romans, they brought crucifixion to a science, you know. But anyway, unfortunately, these Jews lost to the Romans. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem as punishment. And they destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. And this began what is known by Jews as the diaspora. When Jews left the Israel of the biblical times, and they wandered into most of what's Europe. This is why there are so many Jews in Europe. This is where they came from. They left after AD 70. They began leaving. They began emigrating to all over Europe. And in the meantime, of course, there were other Palestinians who were there that had been there all the time. There were the survivors. There's just no way I can get around this. The fact is that, at least according to the Old Testament goes into great detail about this. When the Jews, the Hebrews as they were called then, were freed from Egypt, by Moses. They found this land called the Promised Land. He said that God had promised this land to him. There was only one catch. That land was already occupied. See, that land was occupied by the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Ammonites, and even the Philistines. These were all native people to that land. And according to the Old Testament, these Jews, they just slaughtered everybody. They didn't even give them a chance to convert or anything. No, they just killed them. Got in their way and just took this land. I always had a problem with that, even when I was in Mobile Christian School studying about, there was this passage that even tells about how these Hebrews were told by God to take the Moabite babies and bash their heads against stones. Babies. But God told them to. I think that's when I really began questioning this Christian idea that the Bible is the all-inspired, infallible Word of God. How could anybody really think that God would tell anybody to do something like that? But according to the Old Testament, he did. There were still some survivors, though, and these lived on in Palestine. And over time, Arabs moved in. And so did some Persians as well. But then, almost 2,000 years later, this movement was begun in the late 19th century by Theodor Herzl. He's a European Jew. He came up with this idea to establish a Jewish state. Now, this was not a Jewish state for practitioners of the Jewish religion. No, this was a Jewish state for Jews as an ancestral group, not a religious group. A Jewish national state. This was the birth of Zionism, what's called Zionism, political Zionism. And these political Zionists, they wanted to establish this Jewish state somewhere. They considered many places, but they finally decided, well, let's just go back to where we came from originally. And it was back to what's called the Holy Land of Palestine. See? There was only one problem. It was already inhabited after all that time. But these Zionist Jews were determined, no matter what, they're going to have that land back. And they just started basically just infiltrating everything they could all over the United States and Europe. These were not poor Jews who were in ghettos. There were a lot of poor Jews in ghettos. These were not those. These were wealthy, powerful Jews. And they only had one thing in mind. I mean, they were just extremely ethnocentric Jews. All they cared about was Jews, and that's it. And, everybody else be damned. We're going to have this. And so they started influencing governments, United States government, European governments. Beginning in 1918, when the British took Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. The British was still an empire at that time. It began immediately at the demands of these Zionist Jews in Britain, importing Jews into Palestine, form this Jewish state. And then in 1947, after the Second World War, Zionist Jews demanded, and the British basically gave up the British basically gave up the fate of Palestine to the United Nations. Let the United States nations decide. These Zionist Jews, these powerful, totally ethnocentric Zionist Jews, they used the Holocaust as a way of justifying, saying, well, you need to give us this land. Now, of course, these European countries, the United States and representatives of the United Nations said, well, that land is already inhabited, so we don't care. See, look what was done to our people by the Nazi German regime. See? Now, I find this very, very disturbing, because these Jews hadn't suffered at the hands of the Nazi Germans, had they? No, they hadn't suffered at all. They didn't even, most of them weren't even from Germany, any of that part. They hadn't died in any concentration camps. But they're saying, oh, well, look what was done to our people, so you must give us this land. I always thought, it would have made a little more sense to give them a little slip of Germany. No, you're going to give us this land. It's occupied mostly by Arabs, other people as well, mostly Arabs, and had been for 1,300 years. And they said, you owe this to us because of what these Jews suffered at the hands of the Nazi Germans, and you owe this to us. The Arabs had nothing to do with the Holocaust. You got to punish them, right? And so in 1948, the United Nations, there were Arab nations represented in the United Nations, and they warned, do not do this. This is the worst thing you can do. Jerusalem is our holy land too. And Jews there were some Jews still living there, they're mostly Palestinian, but even under the Ottoman rule. And they were, the Ottoman, rule was generally very tolerant of Christians and Jews, but this exclusively Jewish state, don't form an exclusively Jewish state on land that's mostly ours. But of course, these were outvoted by these European countries because they just didn't really consider Arabs human. See, one thing, they hadn't discovered this oil in these Arab states, so they didn't really consider them anything. They were just a bunch of primitive camel drivers. Oh, and all of a sudden when they discover oil there, oh, now all of a sudden we have respect for them, right? Pretty bad. And so in 1948, this land was established there, Palestine, that included Jerusalem. They never show you this. But of course, the inhabitants there already were just driven off that land, a large piece of land. Anyone who resisted was just gunned down. And they never show you this in the media, of course. Of course not. Anybody who resisted, any Arabs or other Palestinians who resisted being driven off their homes were just gunned down. See? Then and of course, Arab nations, neighboring Arab nations, began to fight against this new Jewish state, very nationalistic Jewish state, which actually had a state religion of Judaism. Still today, to be a citizen of Israel, you have to convert to Judaism. You can be a citizen of Israel. And see, this is the root cause of the Middle East conflict. We wonder why it was caused. This is the root cause of the Middle Eastern conflict. See? More than anything else, the primary cause of the Middle Eastern conflict as we know it today. There were some quotes made about these Zionist Jews by some of the prime ministers. David Ben-Gurion, Israeli Prime Minister in 1949 to 1954, 1955 to 1963. David Ben-Gurion is Israeli Prime Minister. We must expel Arabs and take their places. This is what David Ben-Gurion, Israeli Prime Minister in 1937, said of these Palestinian Arabs. We must expel Arabs and take their places. See? Later on, in 1938, David Ben-Gurion said this: "Let us not ignore the truth among ourselves. Politically, we are the aggressors, and they defend themselves. The country is theirs because they inhabit it, whereas we want to come here and settle down, and in their view, we want to take away from them their country." See? This is an Israeli prime minister basically admitting to this. Even from the very beginning, this modern state of Israel, there are actually movies about it, the Israeli independence movement. Independence from what? No, it was the Palestinians who needed independence. These were the invaders. And this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. This statement was made by Golda Meir, Prime Minister of Israel in 1969 to 1974. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people. It is not as if we came and threw them out and took their country. They didn't exist. They did not exist. Wow. Where have I heard that before? So in other words, because these people didn't actually have a legally recognized nation, they didn't even exist. Isn't that kind of the way the Europeans felt about the Native Americans? Well, these people don't really have a recognized nation, so they don't really exist, do they? Isn't that also how the Europeans, and this is I mentioned before, you're talking about Spain and France and Britain, or many other countries too, but especially France and Britain, colonized almost all of the African continent, almost all of it, in the 19th century, see? And they had the same kind of logic. Well, these people don't have these recognized nations, so they don't really exist, do they? These same European countries, they also used the same justification for conquering and colonizing many Asian nations as well, like India. And even China eventually carved it up and conquer it. Well, these people don't really have a recognized nation as far as we're concerned, so they don't really exist, do they? Pretty bad stuff. Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister of Israel, is the most hard-line Israeli prime minister in Israel's history. He said this in 1989: "Israel should have exploited the repression of the demonstrations in China when world attention focused on that country to carry out mass expulsions among the Arabs of the territories." A couple years ago, there was an election in the modern state of Israel, the Zionist state as I call it, in which Israelis had an opportunity to vote for a less hard-line prime minister than Benjamin Netanyahu. I can't remember the other candidate's name, but even many Israeli Jews felt that he was too hardline. He ended up winning because he told the Israeli people, and this was for the hardliners in the Israeli government more than anything, if I am elected, I will make sure there is never, ever a Palestinian state, ever, even as a separate nation, coexisting with the modern state of Israel. There will never be, I will make sure there will never be a Palestinian nation at all, even in coexistence with Israel. And he won. Because of that. There are more Christian Zionists than Jewish Zionists, or rather Zionist Christians now than Jewish Zionists. You know why? Because Zionist Jews control every single industry of the mass media in the United States. Now this is not by any means, understand, not all Jews in the United States are a part of this Zionist elite that controls every single industry of the mass media in the United States. Not even most Jews in the United States are a part of this Zionist elite that controls every single industry of the mass media in the United States. But because these Zionist Jews control every single, and they do this by reverse discrimination. What they do is they just continue hiring Zionist Jews to keep the top positions in all of these industries, every single industry of our mass media. American Christians, especially in motion pictures and on television, are bombarded with information about the Nazi German regime over and over and over and over again. But American Christians never see anything about the history of the modern state of Israel. Anything. Now, there have been some motion pictures in the distant past made, in fact, 2 of them about Golda Meir, but they are just so unbelievably biased. It's like these really Israeli independents. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And it just shocks me because, I see so many Christians, especially here, even in Pensacola, with support Israel. And they have no idea what they're actually supporting. They don't understand. Because all they see is when we see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, all they ever show, these Zionist Jews show on the news, is these Palestinians, throwing rocks, and they have knives. Well, guess what the Israeli soldiers are equipped with? Assault rifles. See, they never show these Israeli assault rifles, with Israeli soldiers with these assault rifles. They gun these people down. I know that's not exactly a fair fight, is it? Yes, maybe it's a little bit. Yeah, a Palestinian, although it is, he is defending their territory, and stabs an Israeli soldier. An Israeli soldier guns him down. Now, that same Israeli soldier with an assault rifle. It's not exactly a fair fight, is it? But Christians don't know this. This is predominantly a Christian country. And this is why. Christians don't understand what they're supporting. And why does this matter to us so much as American citizens? You know why it matters? Because our federal government is the primary supporter of Israel and has been since 1948, but especially since 1967. See, the Arabs did fight this modern state of Israel. But Israel won this culminated in a 7-day war in 1967. Israel won because it had all of these weapons, conventional weapons, tanks, everything else that had been provided by the United States, by France, by Britain, all these European, all these Western countries. It had an unfair advantage to begin with. And so that's why, these Palestinian Arabs had a lot more land in 1948. Despite this, it didn't include Israel, Jerusalem, of course. And now they have almost none left. And Gaza, they can find a Gaza in the West Bank. See, it's exactly the same. The Zionist Jews have the same plan for the Palestinian Arabs that the Nazi Germans had for Jews. The plan by the Nazi Germans was actually to just get rid of these people. Held them in these concentration camps because they eventually planned to just get them out once they won the war, but of course the Nazi Germans didn't win. The majority of Jews actually were not, there's tremendous evidence to suggest that the majority of the Jews in the concentration camps were killed, but they didn't die, they weren't gassed. Actually, what happened was they mostly died of typhus. There's typhus in this gas, this Zyklon B, was actually a delousing agent that was used. They weren't put into these gas chambers, as we're told. The evidence really suggests that they died of typhus. But they were kept in these crowded conditions. So, the Nazi German regime was still responsible for their deaths. Another thing, too, we are told that 6 million Jews were killed in the Nazi German concentration camps. There are actually countries where if you even question even that figure, 6 million, you can be in prison, including Germany today. There's no free speech in these European countries. There is no evidence whatsoever to support that figure of 6 million. Not at all. A lot of Jews died in the Nazi German concentration camps, most of them really from typhus. And the Nazi German regime was still responsible for their deaths, but there is no evidence whatsoever to support that 6 million Jews died. Not at all. And one more thing here. They call this the Holocaust. But there have been numerous Holocausts throughout history. Holocaust is just basically numerous loss of life. There was a Holocaust of Native Americans, of course, at the hands of Europeans. There was a Holocaust of millions of Soviets under Stalin, Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union. The victims of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, that was a Holocaust. They were victims of a Holocaust. Yeah. The victims of the Dresden fire bombings in Germany. This is civilian, just like the Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not strategic targets at all. No, this was just terrorism, see. These were just civilian targets. These were victims of a Holocaust. And in Dresden, Germany, it was the same thing. The United States government and the British government, dropped these incendiary bombs on these people in Dresden, Germany. It wasn't a strategic target at all. Burned these people alive, thousands of them. Another terrorist act. See, that was a Holocaust. Even the Imperial Japanese troops, they never talk about it. They always talk about that Nazi German, but the Imperial Japanese troops were ruthless. They slaughtered people all over East Asia and Southeast Asia. In Japan, in Korea, in China, in Thailand, everywhere they went. And they did the same thing the Nazi Germans did. They put these people in concentration camps. Even the Nazi Germans were kinder. Generally speaking, they treated U.S. soldiers according to the Geneva Convention rules in their prisoner of war camps. The Imperial Japanese put U.S. soldiers in concentration camps along with these people they had conquered. They were starving to death in these camps, and they were found. So, and the list goes on. The victims, thousands and thousands of victims of Pol Pot's Khmer regime or Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. The thousands of victims of Papa Doc Duvalier's regime in Haiti. And the list goes on and on and on. There have been just countless holocausts throughout history. And yet there's only one International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it is only for the Jewish victims of the Nazi German regime. Isn't that a little bit disturbing and a little bit creepy? That shows how much power these Zionist Jews have, how much influence they have. But this is what Christians are supporting. And it's important that Christians understand this. When you support Israel, this is what you're supporting. And these Zionist Jews, this modern state of Israel, they never talk about this. I've actually seen footage on Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account myself, but there's a mosque in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay? Now, this is a mosque built by Muslims many, many centuries ago. Now, last year, the Israeli government decided to close this mosque off and not allow these Muslims to even worship in this mosque in which they had been worshiping for hundreds of years. Not even let them worship in their mosque. Oh, because there might be a potential terrorist. This is another thing. Any Arabs who resist this occupation are automatically labeled terrorists. Automatically, just like that. And here's something else too. Anybody who disagrees with these Zionist Jews is automatically labeled anti-Semitic. Now, anti-Semitic is a misnomer and has been from the beginning. Anti-Semitic, that term, it dates back to 1888, about the same time the Zionist movement began. Now, anti-Semitic is a misnomer because it is hostility or discrimination against Jews, and only Jews. Now, here's the problem with that. The Jews are not an ethnicity in themselves, not an ethnic group in themselves. Guess who else is? The Arabs. That's right. See, the Arabs and the Jews together comprise the Semitic ethnicity. The Semitic ethnicity originated in the Arabian Peninsula many thousands of years ago. But you never hear any kind of hostility or discrimination against the Arabs as labeled anti-Semitic, do you? Because Zionist Jews don't want you to know that. See? They don't want you to know that. See, these people they're killing, and I mean they kill these people every day. And these people they're subjugating in Gaza and the West Bank are the same ethnic group as they are. Isn't that something? But the United States government is the primary supporter of this Zionist state, this nationalistic Jewish regime. And it's ridiculous because the United States government sends billions of dollars every year to the modern state of Israel, which is not the Israel of biblical times. It's a totally different thing. It's not at all the Israel of biblical times. Every year. Plus countless weapons as well. Now, the United States government, the federal government, sends all this stuff to this modern Israeli state. Now, this nation, this modern state of Israel, what I call the Zionist state, already, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, has more conventional weapons per capita than any other nation on earth. That's right. And the U.S. government, the federal government, our federal government keeps sending money and billions of dollars plus weapons to this modern state of Israel. Not only that, here's something else. Remember when I mentioned in a previous post that there are 9 nations that actually have nuclear weapons? Guess which one of them? Israel is one of them. See? Israel is actually the only nation in the Middle East. Pakistan and India are not actually in the Middle East. Israel is the only nation in the Middle East that actually has nuclear weapons and the technology to build more. Isn't it interesting how Benjamin Netanyahu is always saying, oh, what a threat Iran is if it builds nuclear weapons, when he already knows they already have nuclear weapons there. Kind of hypocritical, isn't it? And yet, the United States government, and see, this is why it matters to us, because this is our government. This is our government. You know, this doesn't affect me directly, because I'm not an Arab, I'm not a Muslim. I can understand why Muslims are angry about this, especially Arabs, especially people right there in Palestine. But it does affect me to some extent because I'm a citizen of the United States, and my federal government is a primary supporter of this modern Israeli state, which is not the Israel of biblical times. No, this is an extremely nationalistic regime. In fact, it's a police state. You know, law enforcement is done by the troops, military. There are a lot of Israeli Jews who are actually opposed. The Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews in Israel, who are actually opposed to fighting, to war. You know, they're like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Amish, whatever. You know, they don't want to send their troops to war. And this Israeli nationalistic regime says, see, all young people, male and female, there's a draft in Israel, and there has been since its inception. Of course there is, because it's an invading state. So you know, all young people, male and female, have to serve in the Israeli military. And there are many Israelis who belong to sects of Judaism, Hasidic in particular, I think, and some Orthodox sects that are opposed to their children being sent off to fight any war, but especially be sent off. Their children are forced into this Israeli military to fight these Palestinians, which they feel, you know, that's just completely wrong. But you know, it's interesting because it's just such a lie. Our federal government is always talking about how Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. There's nothing democratic about Israel at all. It's not a democracy at all. It's a police state. That's just a fact. Now, you want to listen. I'm just going to give you a couple things and I'm going to move on here. There are anti-Zionist Jews in this country and in this world. These are Jews who consider the Israeli government in contradiction to the teachings of the Torah. You can find these out yourself. Now, of course, Christians, this is why I say if you're a Christian, you can believe in Jesus Christ, but you cannot follow Jesus and support the modern state of Israel, the Zionist state. You cannot follow the godly, you cannot reconcile the godly teachings of Jesus with the ungodly policies of the modern state of Israel, the Zionist state. You simply cannot. You cannot follow Jesus and support the modern state of Israel. It is up to us to demand, that our federal government stops. We don't have to go to war with Israel, but that our federal government simply stops supporting it. This is arguably the worst atrocity our federal government is engaging in abroad. Arguably the worst. It's the worst thing our federal government is doing to people in another country. And likewise, just as you cannot follow Jesus and support the the Zionist state, many Jews maintain that you cannot really follow the true teachings of Judaism and follow and support the Zionist state. There are two such groups, and I have tremendous admiration for these Jews. The Zionist Jews hate these Jews. They really hate them because they just tell the truth. They tell it like it is. There are two organizations here, and you want to listen to me. You listen to these. These are real Jews, and they know what they're talking about. They follow the Torah, which is a sacred book of the Jews. Neturei Karta, Neturei Karta. That's nkusa.org. Okay? The website there. Another one is True Torah Jews. That's true, and then Torah, T-O-R-A-H, Jews. And this is True Torah Jews, all one word, .org. And they'll tell you the truth about this. There's another one. This is a website by Palestinians themselves. Now, of course, these aren't in Palestine because they couldn't get away with it. They're under surveillance all the time. But these are Palestinians, who've come to the United States to escape the oppression there. And let me mention one more thing before I forget this. The majority of the Palestinians are Muslim, but there is a very, very large minority of Christians there. That's right. You see, when you support the modern state of Israel, you're supporting persecution and actually just outright killing of Christians as well. There are a lot of Christian Arabs. There are a lot of Christian Palestinians. A large minority of them. And believe me, the Israeli military doesn't treat these people any different than the Muslim Palestinians. I was about to say earlier that I actually seen, I was talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I actually seen on Facebook, these mobile devices. They're really a curse in a free society like this, but they're a godsend, arguably, in a subjugated society like occupied Palestine. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, I've actually seen video footage taken from, using smartphones. So these Palestinians have got guts too, because they can be arrested for even taking videos of this. Of this Al-Aqsa Mosque, Israeli soldiers, and I've seen this with my own eyes here. And this can't be faked or anything like that. They shut this mosque off, won't let Muslims worship there, and these Muslim women are saying they're protesting and crying and wanting to get in. I've seen these Israeli soldiers knock these women down. They just knock them down on the ground. And then the Palestinian men, these Muslim men, come to their defense. You know what they do to them? I've actually seen this. They knock those men down too with their guns, their assault rifles, see? And then I've actually seen this Israeli soldier dragging this Palestinian man, this Muslim man, who's just defending the women who want to worship in that mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, by the feet. His head and his shoulders literally dragging across the pavement, the parking lot, you see. Serious stuff. You don't see this, of course, because it's not in the mainstream media. They would never let you see it. Some things they can't hide. You saw even on our news, in 2014, up to 3,000 men, women, and children were bombed, killed by Israeli bombs in Gaza. It amazed me how many Christians still thought, well, it was justified. How could that be justified? How could you possibly justify that? Back to this, though, the True Torah Jews. This is another group. Now, most of these based in New York City. Yeah. And I would be proud to stand with these people. I have tremendous admiration for these people. The True Torah Jews, TrueTorahJews.org. Now there's another, as I mentioned, website, Palestine Remembered, okay? PalestineRemembered.com. These are Palestinians. They'll tell you the truth too. You know what I find interesting about this? Many of the articles they cite, telling about the history, are written by Jews, see? These are Jews who want to tell the truth too. See? And you want a Christian perspective? Here's an interesting, unique, the Jehovah's Witnesses. I know there's a lot of controversy about Jehovah's Witnesses because of their heavy-handed proselytization techniques and all this kind of stuff. They're really, really hard sell. That's just part of their belief system. They feel they witness to you. It's not going to hurt you. I've had them come up to my door. I talked with them before. Really had a good conversation with them. Same with Mormons. I've had Mormons come and talk to me and talk to them. It's not going to hurt you. The Jehovah's Witnesses have a special set. One thing, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the Trinity. I find that interesting. If I were a Christian, I would probably be a Jehovah's Witness. They believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but they don't believe that Jesus is equal to God. I will say this, actually, there is actually one passage, the idea of the Trinity. There is actually one passage in which even Jesus, according to the Gospel, I don't remember which one it is, but you can look it up. You can find it in a concordance. You can even look it online. And just say this really quick. Jesus is approached by someone who comes up to him and says, "Good master, what good thing shall I do to attain eternal life?" Now Jesus abruptly interrupts this man. He says, "Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God." Jesus says this. See? "Why callest thou me holy? There is none holy but one, that is God. Why callest thou me without sin? There is none without sin but God." I've actually shared that with Christians before, and they say, "Well, it just kind of depends on how you interpret it, doesn't it?" No, I don't think he could make it any clearer than that, Take it or leave it, but that's just a fact. Jesus actually does say that. One verse is according to the Gospels. You can look it up. Okay, Jehovah's Witnesses, nevertheless, Jehovah's Witnesses also they don't support, they don't oppose the modern state of Israel, but they don't support it either. And they'll tell you the truth about this. You can look up at Jehovah's Witnesses at jw.org. jw.org, and then look under the heading, "Are Jehovah's Witnesses Zionists?" This is a question. Are Jehovah's Witnesses Zionists? And they'll tell you their position on it. So there are several there. I don't know, do you think they can see these? Okay, and I'll mention this. This book here, and I apologize. I know is a little. I'm a little self-conscious about this. My eyes are kind of twitching like this. I'm told that that's because I went for a year, not even knowing that my vision began to fade around the time of my 49th birthday. I'm going to be 50 this month. But I didn't know anything was wrong with it. So I went for about a year without glasses when I really needed them. That's the bottom line. And I'm told that is because I'm used to straining. I have to strain that my eyes twitch like this and all that. So anyway, I apologize. I know it's a little bit maybe a little bit distracting. This is an excellent book here. You want a history about the modern state of Israel. This is called Against Our Better Judgment. And it's by Allison Weir, or actually I believe that's actually supposed to be pronounced Weir. It's W-E-I-R. If I'm not mistaken, this is a Jewish lady too. And this is a Jewish lady, this author of this book, she actually went to Israel. And she, for herself, she wanted to see. She came back to, an American woman, and she wrote this book. And of course, she couldn't get this published in the mainstream press because, of course, the Zionists, like as I say, when I say the Zionist Jews control every single industry of the mass media, that includes the publication industry as well. She couldn't get this published in the mainstream press. So she got this book published independently. But this book is against our better judgment. The hidden history of how the U.S. was used to create Israel. See? Has a quote up here by Dean Acheson, a U.S. statesman in 1947. Creating Israel on land already inhabited by Palestinians would, quote, imperil not only American but all Western interests in the Near East, unquote. That's Dean Acheson, U.S. statesman, 1947. This is an extremely enlightening book. And I'll tell you something else about this book, and this is another reason I brought this along. And I know maybe a lot of college students see this. When you're looking at books, the first thing to look at is the bibliography. In other words, works cited, where this author, now of course, with a work of fiction, it doesn't matter. With a work of poetry, it doesn't matter. Even a work of nonfiction that's just a narrative about a person's life, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to a history book or something like that, a text on some particular subject, it really matters about, you know, where the author gets his or her sources, and especially how many sources. And this is the most well-documented book I've ever seen in my life. Most of this book is not even the actual text. It's endnotes and works cited. And look at this, works cited right here, page after page after page that this author uses of actually works cited. This is the most well-documented book I've ever seen in my life. That's why I was so impressed by it, and why I actually ordered it from Amazon. This, I'll just read these first two paragraphs of this book. The Israel lobby in the U.S. is just the tip of an older and far larger iceberg known as political Zionism, an international movement that began in the late 1800s with the goal of creating a Jewish state somewhere in the world. In 1897, this movement, led by a European journalist named Theodor Herzl, coalesced in the first Zionist Congress held in Basel, Switzerland, which established the World Zionist Organization, representing 117 groups the first year, 900 the next. While Zionists considered such places as Argentina, Uganda, the Mediterranean island of Cyprus, and Texas. They eventually settled on Palestine for the location of their proposed Jewish state, even though Palestine was already inhabited by a population that was 93 to 96% non-Jewish. The best analysis says the population was 96% Muslims and Christians, who owned 99% of the land. Against our better judgment. This will give you some information there. Now, I wanted to refer to these also where I get this. I'll be honest, I have learned more about the so-called Civil War since this, this censorship first began as censorship of Confederate flags, and now has actually moved on to actual cultural genocide of the American South. Began the time of my life. I learned about it, the so-called Civil War, the war between the states, the more accurate way of putting it, in high school advanced history class, in which my history teacher, Miss Hayes, an extremely good teacher, told us from the very beginning, history is biased. This is a history teacher telling us this. I got a lot of character for a history teacher to tell us this. It was advanced history at Murphy High School. History is biased. She told us that history is biased, and that's true. All history is biased. Don't take any source of history as the ultimate truth. In fact, don't take any source of information at all as just the absolute truth. There is no one source of all information. There simply isn't. So much of it I learned, and of course I learned that in high school history there was really more about states' rights than about slavery, which was true. The war was. This is a very good book to refer to. You want to learn more about this war. This is the Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. This is by Thomas E. Woods, Jr., Ph.D. And actually, I've just read 3 chapters. The 3 chapters pertaining to the war between the states. The chapter, let's see here, the chapter 5, the North-South division. You see here, chapter 6, the war between the states, and then chapter 7, Reconstruction. Just these 3 chapters. A lot of good information in there. Thomas E. Woods, Jr., Ph.D., The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. I actually heard about this on National Public Radio, in fact. This is another very good document. It's a really enlightening document. And talking about, and this, of course, he has a very large bibliography as well in this book, Thomas Woods. Works cited that he actually uses in other books he suggests he write. But this is one of the most well-documented pieces I've ever read. Also, this is basically an essay, Why the War Was Not About Slavery, by Donald W. Livingston. The substance of this essay was first presented at the 2008 Abbeville Institute Summer School. Donald Livingston is professor of philosophy at Emory University, a member of the SCV, and president of the Abbeville Institute, dedicated to educating college and graduate students about what is true and valuable in the Southern tradition. Now, in the SCV, that's Sons of Confederate Veterans. Let me say something right here. Now, the Sons of Confederate Veterans is always, called a racist organization. Why? Why is it racist? And it's a ridiculous statement. Everybody, you know why it's considered racist? Because it has anything to do with the Confederate States. And of course, people out of ignorance think, well, the Confederate States of America is racist. Now, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, I'm not actually a member myself, but from what I've seen, the Sons of Confederate Veterans is not a racist organization at all. Is the daughters of the American Revolution. These are and the sons of the American Revolution, the DAR and the SAR. These are descendants of American Revolutionary War soldiers. Are they anti-British? No. You maintain the values represented in the American Revolution. That's all it's about. They're not anti-British. And likewise, the Sons of Confederate Veterans are not, of course, they're not racist. The war had nothing, really wasn't a war about race anyway. But they're not even anti-Northern. These are just a group of people who feel that there should be some memoriam tribute to our Confederate dead. And they do have a Confederate Memorial Day in place of Greece. One reason I never joined before is because, my 3 ancestors actually were Confederate veterans. They didn't actually die in battle. If they had, I probably would join this organization automatically. They didn't actually die in battle. Now, I understand my great-great-great-uncle Frederick Mayo died soon after battle-related injuries. But they didn't actually die in battle, so it's not. But the Sons of Confederate Veterans is not a racist organization. That's just a ridiculous statement. And now it looks to me, looking at their website, they're very conservative, but they're not racist, and they're certainly not anti-American either. Very much just proud Southerners, descendants. But anyway, this essay, you can look this up online. All you have to do is Google it. Why the War Was Not About Slavery. I'll take you right to it. Why the War Was Not About Slavery by Donald W. Livingston. Now, this is a very well-documented piece. As I said, you got a lot of endnotes here, which he draws me sources. Let me read the concluding passage of this. I was going to talk about I was going to talk about let's see. There was certainly a lot of anti-slavery talk. I mean, it was what I was going to say. I was like, we're going to talk about the war between the states some because, and it's not technically the war between the states either. It was really a war. It was really just a war, as I said before. But I didn't want to focus too much on that because that's not really the issue here anymore. But let me read this concluding passage. To conclude, there was certainly a lot of anti-slavery talk in the antebellum period, but it did not have the moral content the official story implies. We have examined the major anti-slavery episodes from the Philadelphia Convention in 1787 to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Not a single one was motivated by a moral intention to do something about freeing the African population or attending to its welfare. In every case, the motive was the economic and political interests of white people in the North and West against those of the South. The African population was viewed from New England throughout the North and across the West as a pariah people to be removed from one's presence as far as possible. This is very, very important right here. It's one of the most important statements I've read. The South did not secede to protect slavery from a national plan of emancipation because no national political party proposed emancipation. The South did not secede to protect slavery from a national plan of emancipation because no national political party proposed emancipation. Indeed, there was greater legal protection for slavery in 1860 than ever. Now, the South did not secede to expand slavery into the Western territories because, given its geography and, more importantly, the racial attitudes of Westerners, there was no realistic possibility of the plantation system moving west. Besides, by leaving the Union, the Southern states lost all claim to the use of those territories. We should also note that the Confederate Constitution abolished the slave trade and allowed the entrance of non-slave holding states. Confederates were not intent on spreading slavery to every state in the Confederacy. And the same people who wrote the Confederate Constitution were not disposed in the 1850s, contrary to Lincoln and the official story, to spread slavery throughout the United States. It is true that some states gave a tax on slavery as a reason for seceding, but not all of them did. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas at first refused to join the Confederacy. They reversed themselves after Lincoln ordered what they considered an unconstitutional invasion of the seceding states. As Lee said, Robert E. Lee said, he did not want to live in a union held together by bayonets. Those states that did give a tax on slavery as a reason for seceding did not have in mind resistance to a morally responsible, nationally funded program of emancipation, but the virulent, irresponsible attacks of abolitionists. Their long advocacy of a slave insurrection and terrorism was put in practice by John Brown and supported by national cultural elites and even government officials. When the governor of Virginia requested the return for trial of fugitives of Brown's raid, which had fled north, the governors of Ohio and Iowa refused to comply, even though the Constitution requires governors to return fugitives from justice to the state where the alleged crime occurred when requested by the governor of that state. South Carolina, Texas, and Mississippi mentioned this breakdown in the rule of law as one of their reasons for seceding. And to this we should add northern leaders moving through the uncharted territory of the Industrial Revolution were beginning to deny that America is a federation of states. They began talking of it as a unitary nationalist regime with the central government having plenary powers, controlled, of course, by the North. This was contrary to the Jeffersonian vision of the Constitution as a federation of sovereign states, which dominated in the South and which was the view of many in the North as well. Lincoln got no electoral votes from the South. He was the first sectional president. Southern fears the Republican Party was a revolutionary party seeking to destroy the Federation of States in favor of a unitary state governed by the North, was openly affirmed by Wendell Phillips, a nationally recognized leader in the abolitionist movement. Prior to Lincoln's election, he gave a speech explaining the meaning of the Republican Party. Quote, "It is just what we have attempted to bring about. It is the first sectional party ever organized in this country. It calls itself national, but it is not national, it is sectional. The Republican Party is a party of the North pledged against the South," unquote. If there were indeed two sections with such strong identities that one could be pledged against the other, why not separate them and have two distinct federations of states? The Union was morally dissolved prior to the South's secession. The North did not acquire a, quote, treasury of virtue, unquote, from prosecuting one of the bloodiest wars of the 19th century. Instead, it acquired a habit of self-righteousness and moral self-deception, which unfortunately has become a national characteristic. Just as Northerners suppressed the obvious fact slavery was a national evil for which they bore some responsibility, so our popular history today cannot acknowledge the invasion and plundering of the South from 1861 to 1867 was an awful crime, as the great 19th century liberal Lord Acton, this is a British Lord, Acton put it. Their very identity requires they view the conflict instead as a great moral struggle to abolish slavery, even though the antebellum North put forth no morally responsible proposal for eliminating it. The official story that the war was a great moral struggle for the, quote, soul of the nation, unquote, only strengthens the disposition to self-deception and self-righteousness. The war could not have been a battle for the soul of the nation because America in 1860 was not a centralized nation state that could be said to have a soul. It was an inchoate federation of sovereign states only 70 years old. It had grown in only 50 years to more than 4 times its original size, which was expanding to the Pacific, and in which secession had been publicly acknowledged as an option in every section of the Union. Our nationalistic historians have made it virtually impossible to perceive the moral truth that the best solution to all the problems confronting the Federation of States in 1860 would have been a peaceful division into 2 federations, which is what the early abolitionists recommended. That, among other things, would have ended the fear that Southerners would use the Western territories as a dumping ground for emancipated Africans, because by seceding they would have no constitutional claim to those territories. Secession would also have hastened the extinction of slavery, which drew its strength from being integrated with the Union. Jefferson Davis himself said that secession would mean the end of slavery. The official story that the war was about the South's desire to protect and expand slavery and the North's determination to abolish it is not merely an error in academic history. The evidence against it has not been ignored so much as it has been suppressed. It had to be suppressed because it contradicts the legitimating myth of the centralized nationalistic regime that emerged after the war. This is one of the most important things I've ever read before in my life. Having been repeated so often, it has come to be believed because of repetition. Isn't that interesting? So many things we believe, we don't even know where they came from, but we've just heard them all of our lives. And we just accept them as truth, just because they've been repeated so often. Having been repeated so often, it has come to be believed because of repetition. there is a lack of moral maturity in a regime that cannot confront its own moral failures, but constructs its national identity by projecting those failures onto a scapegoat. And this disordered view of moral reality, accepted by both the people and their rulers, cannot but have a deleterious effect on domestic and foreign policy. A great stride would be made in ending the ideological style of politics, so characteristic of Lincoln's rhetoric, which distorts the moral lens through which public conflicts are perceived. If the whole truth were told about the North's role in slavery, in constructing racial attitudes, and in its failure to even remotely confront the great moral challenge posed by slavery. But that would require writing a quite different kind of history from the one taught to the public over the past 50 years. Indeed, it would require seriously rethinking the standard narrative of postbellum American nationalism. Such a history is long overdue. As I hope to have suggested in this essay, there is no lack of evidence to support writing such a history. All right, and this is another really interesting piece. And I actually wrote this in my blog, giving some, and I just entitled it Revelations About the Real Lincoln. This is interesting because the letter to the editor that I previously read was in the Pensacola News Journal, and at the same time, this editorial was in there on that same day. And I saw this. And I entitled this post in my blog, Revelations About the Real Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is arguably the most mythologized of all U.S. presidents. The following editorial by syndicated columnist Walter Williams includes some surprising revelations about the real Lincoln. And this is the editorial. Does Civil War need a new name? We call the War of 1861 the Civil War. But is that right? A civil war is a struggle between two or more entities trying to take over the central government. Confederate President Jefferson Davis no more sought to take over Washington, D.C. than George Washington sought to take over London in 1776. Both wars, those of 1776 and 1861, were wars of independence. Such a recognition does not require one to sanction the horrors of slavery. We might ask, how much of the war was about slavery? Was President Abraham Lincoln really for outlawing slavery? Let's look at his words. In an 1858 letter, Lincoln said, quote, I have declared 1,000 times and now repeat that, in my opinion, neither the general government nor any other power outside of the slave states can constitutionally or rightfully interfere with slaves or slavery where it already exists, unquote. In a Springfield, Illinois speech, he explained, quote, my declarations upon this subject of Negro slavery may be misrepresented but cannot be misunderstood. I have said that I do not understand the Declaration of Independence to mean that all men were created equal in all respects, unquote. What about Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation? Here are his words, quote, I view the matter of slaves' emancipation as a practical war measure to be decided upon according to the advantages or disadvantages it may offer to the suppression of the rebellion, unquote. He also wrote, quote, I will concede that emancipation would help us in Europe and convince them that we are incited by something more than ambition, unquote. When Lincoln first drafted the proclamation, war was going badly for the Union. London and Paris were considering recognizing the Confederacy and assisting it in its war against the Union. Lincoln did articulate a view of secession that would have been heartily endorsed by the Confederacy, quote, any people anywhere being inclined and having the power have the right to rise up and shake off the existing government and form a new one that suits them better. Nor is this right confined to cases in which the whole people of an existing government may choose to exercise it. Any portion of such people can revolutionize and make their own of so much of the territory as they inhabit," unquote. Lincoln expressed that view in an 1848 speech in the U.S. House of Representatives, supporting the war with Mexico and the secession of Texas. Why didn't Lincoln share the same feelings about Southern secession? Follow the money. During the 1850s, tariffs amounted to 90% of federal revenue. Southern ports paid 75% of tariffs in 1859. What, quote, responsible, unquote, politician would let that much revenue go? And here I ended the post with this. Let me add that Lincoln's admission of the true motive behind his Emancipation Proclamation as a quote unquote practical war measure was clearly demonstrated in its application. Lincoln is considered the great emancipator, but facts prove otherwise. The most damning is this: Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation applied only to the Confederate States. It did not apply to the border states. The border states were 4 slave states that had not seceded from the United States: Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. Under the Emancipation Proclamation, slavery continued in the border states even after the slaves in the Confederate States were freed. Slavery was ended in Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware only as each of those states' governments abolished it. Of course, it was ended finally in December of 1865. This was after Lincoln's assassination, long after it. In December of 1865 was ended completely with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Now, we're back, as Johnny Carson used to say. These are maps. I was talking in the first session of this presentation about the African slave trade, and it's just amazing. And all these maps are available on the internet, and these are just a few copies showing these, how these worked. You can find so much right there on the internet. You just Google in a transatlantic slave trade, and you go to images, and you will find all of these maps. Show you all kinds of things about the trans-American slave trade. Look at this triangular trade. Now, this is showing how this worked. Buy English goods with sugar, sell English goods for fish and lumber. Another triangular trade. New England gives rum to West Africans for slaves to Caribbean for sugar. See? The Europeans had this big operation going on here. Big operation. Cover the entire Atlantic. The Romans took slaves. I mentioned, the one reason I wish the Jews would have run their revolt, and I wish anybody would have run a revolt against the Roman Empire. Romans enslaved, my European ancestors, Celts, Germanics, and even the Picts. These were the people of North Scotland, or rather the original people of Scotland. Romans took slaves from all over, but I swear to God, this transatlantic slave trade is probably the most expansive and just downright industrial scale slave trade that's ever gone on in this world. Just unbelievable. Yeah. And it's like I said, the only thing that really abolished slavery, really stopped all of this, ironically, was the industrial age technology, machines, machines. There's another piece here. You can Google this too, a Confederate catechism. This was written just after the First World War. In fact, it's so old that the author refers to the First World War as the World War. It's written by Leon Gardner Tyler, or Leon Gardner Tyler. It doesn't really have a lot of stuff to back this up, but I found this especially interesting. There's a lot of information in here. I had heard before that actually the war actually didn't begin in Fort Sumter, but in actually, I mentioned John Appleyard before. I know John Appleyard because of these presentations he's done. I think it's called Reflections of Pensacola History on Cox Channel 2 here in Pensacola area, and these are fascinating presentations. And in one of these, he talks about an actual incident at Fort Barrancas here in Pensacola. That's on the grounds of the present grounds of the Pensacola Naval Air Station, in which some Confederates fired on a Union troop that refused to cede, and a few months before Fort Sumter. But in this, and that could very well be. And I'd also heard that it actually started at Fort Pickens. That's also in Pensacola, Fort Pickens. That there was a truce between here, just in the greater Pensacola area, between the Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers at Fort Pickens, and they same kind of thing. They just decided the Union started just building up Fort Pickens' power, and wouldn't cede it to the Confederates. The Confederates opened fire on that, and that's talked about greatly here. Confederate Catechism. A lot of information in here. It's very useful, basically a catechism is basically just question and answer. Now, like I say, this isn't heavily documented. There's only one, but this is apparently a Southern. This Leon Gardner Tyler was apparently a Southern scholar, basically. When he wrote this, Ulysses S. Grant was still alive. That's how long ago this was. Let's see. There was something I found in here that actually. Let's see here. Yeah, there was something in here that I actually found I didn't agree with. See, and I'll explain why I'm even bringing this up in a moment. But, there's one part here where this Gardner Tyler talks about how Lincoln, in his Gettysburg Address, confessing, quote, malice toward to none and charity to all, unquote, he slandered the South by describing the slave owner as an incarnate demon who did nothing but lash his slaves without giving the least requital for their service of 250 years. The Negroes were the most spoiled domestics in the world. The Southerners took the Negro as a barbarian and cannibal, civilized him, supported him, clothed him, and turned him out a devout Christian. Booker T. Washington admitted that the Negro was the beneficiary rather than the victim of slavery. Now, see, I had actually heard this sentiment before, and not just by Southern whites, but Northern whites as well, that this slavery was actually good for these Africans because they were, in the eyes of Europeans, in the eyes of these Anglo-Americans, basically these are just savages and all this kind of stuff. Well, of course, I don't agree with that. How you define civilization and all. I consider that a very, very bigoted view, and it really is not something that was acquired by Southerners or or Americans. And I mean, it wasn't a unique Southern view of old, or it wasn't a unique American view. This was obviously taken from the Europeans. This was how the Europeans viewed slavery, and viewed the Africans. And I've said before, the Europeans viewed the Africans as these sub-Saharan African south of the Sahara as just civilized, uncivilized, just savages, barbarians, and all this. He even says here cannibals and all that stuff. And not likely, find like any cannibals. But he viewed them the same way they viewed the Native Americans. This is an extremely bigoted view. I'm opposed. I don't agree with this opinion, and I actually am a little bit offended by it. Now, I think it would be a good idea, because that passage is in there, why don't I just destroy this? What do you think? You think I ought to just rip this up? See, this pamphlet is full of actually facts, very little opinion, but mostly facts. Talking about even the fact that Fort Pickens, first shots of the Civil War might have actually been fired at Fort Pickens. But because that passage offends me, maybe it would be a good idea to take this part here and just rip it up, right? Throw it away. What do you think? You think that would be a good idea? Be censorship, but it's okay. What do you think? Isn't that, wouldn't that be ridiculous? There's a saying my mom taught me: throwing out the baby with the bathwater. See, what that means is throwing out the baby with the bathwater is throwing every good thing out because there's some bad thing, included. So you throw the whole thing out. Let's do away with the flag of the United States, because despite all this the good stuff about the United States, there's also some bad stuff of the United States. So why don't we just destroy the American flag? Or, just throw it out. Why don't we just say the same thing with France and Britain and Spain and, of course, the Confederate States? Let's not acknowledge anything good. Let's just destroy everything, because, see, here's the problem with that. You're going to find something offensive in everything you read, everything you see, no matter what. When you really think about it, you take into, every human being who's ever existed, all of humanity, there's a lot of good in humanity, but there's also a lot of bad. Why don't we why don't we just all kill ourselves, right? What do you think? Just destroy the world. Maybe this is a little bit theatrical, But the point I'm making is this is what censorship is about. See, censorship accomplishes very little. That's really interesting. The first time I actually stood up and protested anything, it was censorship. That's right. See, back in the early 90s, there was at Murphy High School, there was a rally held by this Donald Wildman. He's this kind of a funny name for a radio evangelist. Wildman, like a wild man. It's spelled with an O instead of an A. Donald Wildman. He was this really just radio evangelist, and he was a big moralist kind of guy, and kind of like Jerry Falwell, and all this stuff. And he was holding this rally in Mobile to ban the sale of softcore pornographic magazines like Playboy, Penthouse, and all from convenience stores. Now these weren't being sold to children, and prohibited. Children couldn't buy these. He's had little things in front of them, they couldn't even see them. Well, of course, I was personally interested in that. I'd been getting girly magazines, all of my teenage years. But, so there was a personal component to it. Although by this time I was mostly getting British magazines because the British women were just healthier. They were more voluptuous. The American women were just kind of emaciated. Nevertheless, I had a problem with this. And maybe I wouldn't have said a thing about it except that it was held at the auditorium of my alma mater, Murphy High School, see. And in the auditorium there. So I drove up there and I had a sign, speaking out against censorship in Mobile and all this. We had the right to read, and I was talking about adults, of course, we had the right to read what we choose and everything like this. And I was shocked because I expected there to be other protesters there. There were none. And I walked into the foyer with my sign, and this woman comes up to me and says, "I'll pray for you," in the most insincere way, like, let's use prayer as a weapon here. "I'll pray for you." And that's what it was. I get these, and it was a very enlightening experience for me because I actually had to. One of the local television stations was there. I think it was WKRG in Mobile. I'm not sure. And one of the reporters was there with some others, and they were interviewing people who were there, and they were talking about why they were against pornography and they don't feel it should be said and all this kind of stuff. And I was the only one there, opposing this rally against it. It really, wasn't against. It was the local government should not allow any adult magazines to be sold anywhere. Period. In convenience stores, bookstores, no matter what, even though they're not sold to children and minors, regardless, and they're not sold anywhere. In other words, adults shouldn't be able to acquire these things. About censorship, government imposed censorship, same thing. And it was a very enlightening experience for me because I actually asked this reporter, had his camera crew there from WKRG, to interview me, and he came up, interviewed me, and of course, I said, I made it very, very clear that I definitely did not feel that magazines should be sold. These kind of magazines, these Playboy and Penthouse and Gallery and things like this, should be sold to minors. Minors, but that I felt that we adults, we should be able to choose that. The city government should not tell us we can't have these magazines as adults. And I recorded this. I actually when I got home, I set my VCR to record the 10 o'clock news, and I was absolutely shocked because when I saw the piece, this television station had edited it in such a way that you had this one guy, being interviewed, and just one, who represented these Donald Wildman followers in this rally, saying, "I don't feel that these magazines should be available for children." Not anything else, just that part. As if that's really what they're there for, is, "Oh, I don't feel these magazines should be available to minors." And they didn't have me on there saying the same thing, which I did. No, they just said, they just had the part where I said I'm opposed to the censorship in Mobile. So basically, what this television station, I think it was WKRG, did, it made this one guy look like an upstanding citizen, and made me look like just be some kind of pervert, who doesn't give a damn, even let some kid have these, right? That was when I first learned not to trust the press. When I first learned not to trust the press. But isn't it interesting? That was the first thing I really stood against. Censorship. Right? and these censorship of flags, historical displays. It's the same thing. But this is even worse. I mean, these aren't adult magazines. This is history. Pensacola history. You're censoring history. I certainly do believe that parents should have to, parents have to practice censorship with their children. Certainly, you have the V chip in the television. That's what it's for. It's actually censorship. But governments should not impose censorship on adults. I'm sorry, it just shouldn't. Governments, local or federal or state, or province or whatever, should not impose censorship on adults. It just shouldn't. It's not the right of government to tell adults what they can read or see or whatever. And that's exactly what's going on here. And I'll give you a case in point. Censorship is even bad for an individual. I got this from my my late maternal grandfather. This belonged to him. This is the Liberty Collection. It was actually put out by an insurance company, or not an insurance company, Freedom's Foundation, Valley Forge, The American Way of Life. This is very, very old, and it's a facsimile. As you can see, here's the Declaration of Independence, and these are facsimiles, so it's written exactly as the writers wrote it. And you get with the S's that look like F's, the whole shebang, And when I got this has a unanimous Declaration of Independence, has the Constitution. It has the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It has the Monroe Doctrine. It has the Star-Spangled Banner lyrics. It has the Pledge of Allegiance. Look at this. There's a missing page. Missing page. You know who cut that out? I cut that out. That was Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. You see, I knew even way back then, many, many, many years ago, around 2000, actually 1999 more like it, that Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was really just a very, very brilliantly placed propaganda piece. I knew that Lincoln basically was talking about, the whole idea was that Lincoln in his Emancipation Proclamation was basically talking about how these Union troops were were fighting for independence, and of course the Southern troops were fighting for slavery. See, and which of course was just total nonsense. It was, if anything, it wasn't exactly the other way around, but it was the Southern soldiers that were fighting to maintain independence. And let's depersonalize it from the soldiers. The soldiers just had to do, and let me, this is one thing, soldiers were drafted on both sides. I think I've mentioned that before. Soldiers were drafted on both sides. So a lot of them didn't have a choice. But this was not the United States fighting for independence from the Confederate States. It was the other way around. These Southern states were fighting to maintain the independence that had already been given them by the president before, by Lincoln's predecessor, James E. Buchanan. But Lincoln had a way of turning around. It's very important to understand. Lincoln was a lawyer. Lincoln was a lawyer. He was very, very good with words. He was a brilliant man. He was a lawyer. Just like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are just, unscrupulous as hell. I still consider Bill Clinton to be extremely unscrupulous, and Hillary Clinton too. Why? They were lawyers. I've always found it kind of bizarre that we get all of our Supreme Court justices, all judges basically, they begin as lawyers. Well, that's really kind of crazy when you think about it, because judges are supposed to be totally impartial. Lawyers are trained in law school to be partial, to be biased, and expected to be biased. So how can lawyers be, I've actually considered a possibility that we come up with this idea, judicial school. See, those who want to be attorneys, those who want to be lawyers, they go to law school, and then those who want to be judges and only judges, they go to judicial school. Now, they have to learn twice as much as the lawyers, almost twice as much. They have to go for a lot longer because they have to learn both sides of the law. Judicial school. For students that want to be judges. See, ideally, you have this judicial school. I think it's a good idea. I think we should have a judicial school. So judges never start out as lawyers. And I see really, because when you really think about it, lawyers are the least eligible people to be judges. They're trained to be biased. They're trained to be partial. They're expected to be partial, and then you let them be judges when they're expected to be impartial. That's not logical at all. That's crazy. Lawyers should be the one occupational group. They shouldn't allow lawyers to be judges at all. The one, Lincoln was a lawyer. Lincoln actually defended. Not long, before I think it was actually 1858, as an attorney, Lincoln actually defended a slave owner to have an escaped slave returned to him. That's right. Lincoln actually defended a slave owner. I believe it was in Missouri or in Illinois. Actually, might have been in Illinois, to have this slave returned to his slave owner. Lincoln did. The great emancipator, huh? Nevertheless, look at this. And I knew that. And I knew that, in other words, I knew that the Gettysburg Address was just bullshit. It's just bullshit. I knew that. And that's why I cut it out. And now I'm sorry. You know why I'm sorry? I'm not sorry because, I've changed my mind that it's not bullshit. It is bullshit. It's just propaganda, beautifully put propaganda. I'm sorry that I cut it out because I don't even know what it says. See, I can't even actually point right here, right now. I can't even point to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and show you what's wrong with it because I censored it for myself. Here's what censorship does. This is also what makes this country unique in all the world? It's not this flag here. It's not our flag. The only thing it makes is nothing except this. Constitution. That's the Declaration. Okay. The Constitution of the United States. Look how small this document is. 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages. 3 pages. That's how big our Constitution actually is. And look at this, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to our Constitution. These are where all our rights are in the United States. These are where all rights are. Guaranteed in our government. The founders of the United States had a lot of trust. I mean, they were actually giving these people unprecedented freedom, which they could actually overthrow the government they established. But they thought it would be a good idea to take that chance. See? Go ahead and do it. Yeah. Look at this. This is the only thing that makes the United States unique in all the world. Everything else the U.S. has, every other country has, except this. That's it. And especially this, the Bill of Rights. You know, the bottom line is, as important as as sacred as the Quran is to Muslims, as sacred as the Torah is to Jews, as sacred as the Bible is to Christians, this right here should be sacred to citizens of the United States. This should be our sacred book. That's how important, that's how essential it is. These, and just this very small document, the Bill of Rights, is just loaded. I've got the first one memorized. Congress shall make no law. This is the First Amendment. This is important right here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Isn't that brilliant? People call it, say this is a Christian country. No, not exactly. But the very first clause in our Constitution is about religion. Okay. Founders of this country, not all of them were exactly Christians. A lot of them were deists, which is kind of what I am. Basically, a deist is one who believes there's a God, a supreme being, but this supreme being doesn't really intervene in human affairs much. You know, just kind of lets things be. But nevertheless, religion is the very first thing they addressed. It's even got this document right here. You even have the ones that weren't ratified, so it's kind of confusing. You had to go down here to Article the 3rd to get to the First Amendment. And the First Amendment, let's see, which is actually Article the 3rd because it's the only one, you know, ratified. These others weren't. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, it's not going to be a state religion, you know, like Iran today has. Like Israel has. Israel has a state religion, it's Judaism. Iran has a state religion. It's not only Islam, it's a Shiite sect of Islam. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now see, there are a lot of countries where religion is pretty much prohibited, at least frowned on. Communist China, North Korea, the former Soviet Union. You know. See, what this means is in the United States, there's not going to be a state religion. We're not just going to have one religion, no. And there's also, and all religions will be tolerated. Now, see. All right. See, this is a First Amendment. These are our rights here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, freedom of religion, okay? Or abridging the freedom of speech, our right to freedom of speech, or of the press, free press. Now, as I mentioned before, freedom of the press is the only right in our Bill of Rights that is not endangered at all, because literally the Zionist Jews who control our press abuse it so much. And whether you even think of them as Zionist Jews, I know they are, but you know, if you don't want to accept that, you know, whoever controls our press, they abuse our press. And they're extremely powerful people. And this is why freedom of the press is not endangered at all. And it's the only one of our rights in our Bill of Rights that's not endangered at all, because it's so abused. And yet, it's kind of ironic, but because freedom of the press is so abused by those who control our press, it's actually inciting infringement on our other freedoms, isn't it? See? Let's see, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You know what that means? That means to protest. That doesn't mean you don't have to have guns or anything. That's basically to protest, to assemble, to gather together and protest. See? Second Amendment. As I've said before, it's more than just the right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment, and like I said, it's kind of confusing, is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now see, this is why this is so important. It's saying a well-regulated militia. I don't think the founders intended for there to be a separation here. The idea is you had so that militias could be formed, see? But what does it say here? Regulated militia, see? I don't think the framers of this Constitution, even though they say regulated right to keep and bear arms, it still goes along with regulated militia. In my view, this is saying implicitly that gun ownership is going to be regulated. And when you think about it, it has to be. You know, you would never, they would have never given, I think I've mentioned this before, they certainly would have never given guns to slaves. They certainly would have never given guns to Native Americans, they wouldn't have given guns to convicts or anything like that. Arguably, they wouldn't have given let a lot of women have guns. Didn't have to defend their homes or anything like that. But the bottom line is guns have always been regulated in this country. And there's no mention of regulation of freedom of speech, religion, and all that. Why? Because that doesn't kill anybody. It's not as dangerous. But guns are dangerous. Guns are dangerous. They're not nearly, I will say this really quick, guns are not nearly as dangerous. Guns are not nearly as dangerous as mobile devices are. Guns are not nearly as dangerous as cell phones, iPhones, and smartphones. These are far more dangerous than guns because the usage of them behind the wheel is actually killing people. And these things are literally interfering with our communication with each other. So they're more dangerous than guns are. We'll say that. You made this, in my opinion. Those are just the first two amendments. Look at this. The 12th. So actually, the first three of these, or rather, two of these were not ratified. So that's actually like 10 amendments. Yeah, 10 amendments. That's right. 10 amendments, each having at least one right in there. You're talking about a lot of rights. Now, most of these other rights in these other amendments have to do with court, the right against unwarranted search and seizure, that kind of thing. But they're all so important, so important. This censorship of these Confederate flags, I call it an indirect violation of freedom of speech, because I can wear this shirt, and it's not taken away from me. This first Confederate flag. But you see, the way this goes is, just as once these federal and state governments start censoring Confederate flags, even from just purely historical displays, well, they move on to Confederate memorials, and they'll eventually, of course, move on to Confederate graves and cemeteries. You give politicians an inch, they'll take a mile, and the more inches you give politicians, the more miles they'll take. That's how politicians are. See? In the same way, they start by indirectly infringing on our freedom of speech by removing even this flag from the 5 flags displayed here in Pensacola. And eventually, if no resistance is shown, eventually it will be illegal for me to wear this. Eventually nobody will be allowed to wear this, see. This is how our rights get infringed. This is how politicians move, see. Extremely dangerous. Let me say one more thing about censorship. You know what's really interesting about censorship now? The censorship I was describing earlier, This Donald Wyman. And as it happened, one thing I learned about that experience, they did sign this petition, didn't go through. City of Mobile, so I didn't really even need to protest, but I didn't know that. I thought these people really had a lot of power, and the City of Mobile would just not allow the sale of any adult. I'm not talking hardcore porn. I'm talking Playboy and Penthouse, all this softcore stuff, anywhere in the city for adults, you know. But the City of Mobile didn't give in to the demands of this minority, many of whom came from outside the city anyway. Donald Wyman wasn't even from Mobile. But these were religious conservatives, see? These were religious conservatives. But you know what's really interesting? There is more censorship now in this country than ever before, but it's not religious conservatives, it's secular liberals. Isn't that fascinating? Secular liberals. But it's the same thing. But it's even more dangerous because the governments are literally giving into this. And here's a really good example. The two funniest books that I have, or rather, not funniest books, the two funniest novels I have ever read in my life are The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger and Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, a.k.a. Samuel Clemens. Now, these are the two funniest novels that I have ever read in my life. They're hilarious. Now, The Catcher in the Rye is a funny novel, but The Catcher in the Rye is full of profanity. It's interesting because both novels are similar in that in both novels, in The Catcher in the Rye as well as Huckleberry Finn, the story is told from the point of view of one of the characters, see, the main character, not from an outside narrator. So they're similar in that way. But The Catcher in the Rye is a funny book, but it is full of profanity. A lot of God damn it. Boy, he says that. Holden Caulfield, I think is the main character. He says God damn it over and over and over. And that's why not long after The Catcher in the Rye was published, I believe it was in the 1960s, and oh man, I tell you what, they started having a lot of religious conservatives. Oh boy, they wanted to ban these books like in high school. They didn't think high school children read these books. No matter how well they were written, they wanted to go after The Catcher in the Rye, go after Slaughterhouse 5, all these, because of profanity, things like this, you know. Catcher in the Rye is mostly just profanity and all that. Oh boy, these religious conservatives, they wanted to ban these in high school. And all through the 60s, they wanted to ban these and not have these high school students read these books at all because they use so much profanity. And oh man, there was a big fuss about it. And of course the liberals, of course, they fought them and all that kind of stuff. And blah 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 blah. Well, I feel that it was a little much. Now, certainly I don't think elementary children should be reading The Catcher in the Rye, but I don't think it's too much for high school students to be reading a book well written and everything like that. It has a really good message. That's another thing, it has a really good message behind it. Basically just teenage angst is what the book is about. It's kind of how we express it, But there was a lot of controversy about that. But it was religious conservatives that wanted that book censored. That's the bottom line. The religious conservatives that wanted The Catcher in the Rye censored, along with any other book. Now, 50 years later, Huckleberry Finn. Well, a bunch of people wanted it censored too. Wanted it removed from high school shelves. But guess who wanted this removed? It wasn't religious conservatives. It was secular liberals. You know why? Because the word nigger is used throughout it. Secular liberals. They wanted Huckleberry Finn censored. In other words, high school students wouldn't even be allowed to even look at this book in their libraries. These secular liberals came in. Oh, you can't have this book even in your high school library because it has the word nigger in it. Isn't that something? Kind of crazy, isn't it? And you know, a few years ago, this publisher, and so they say it's a racist book. Well, how many of them have read that book? It's really interesting because, you know, I've read that book, and by no means is it a racist book at all. If anything, it's the opposite. I studied that book actually in graduate school at the University of South Alabama, Huckleberry Finn. And I read The Catcher in Rye on my own time. I didn't read that in high school, but Huckleberry Finn in graduate school, very thoroughly. It's really something because the book is about Huckleberry Finn, this kid, you know, who just, this white kid, I believe it's set in Missouri, so he's really a northern kid, but he's get this you know, he's off on his own. He meets up with this escaped slave, Jim, and he takes Jim along, and, you know, he doesn't think, well, this is an escaped slave, I turned in and thought, this is just a kid, you know, he doesn't have to worry, he's not worried about that. So he has Jim come along, this is slave, this a little bit older, a black man, African American, you know, and they go along on this trip and talks about the trip. And you know what the whole theme of the book is? How similar Huckleberry Finn and Jim are. One's white, one's black, but look how similar they are. There's even a joke in the book, you know, Huckleberry, Jim gets cut, and Huckleberry's just amazed at how, you know, his blood is red, just like mine is. And all through the book, they actually form this friendship. He's still a young man. And you know, the interesting thing is there is so much funny stuff about Huckleberry Finn. Little frailties, little human frailties. You could say negative things about Huckleberry Finn as a person. But there are also so many positive things about Huckleberry Finn as a person. In the same way, there's so many kind of little frailties that Jim has, little failings that he has as a person. Some of them just downright amusing. And there are also all kinds of positive things, little likable things about Jim as a person. And you find that there's, you know, there's no moral superiority of one race or another, see. The book is, if anything, the book, Huckleberry Finn, is anti-racist. But the reason the word nigger is used throughout the book is because Huckleberry Finn is the speaker, and that's just the word they used. Americans used to use that word. This is a poor, you know, this isn't a Harvard-educated kid. This is, you know, this is just a kid, basically a poor white kid, you know. And that's the word they used. A few years ago, there was so much controversy over that. And these secular liberals want to ban Huckleberry Finn because they don't like the word nigger. And they consider a racist book only because of that. Obviously, they hadn't read the book, right? And this white guy, this white publisher, he decided he was going to publish the book with the word nigger completely deleted. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? He's kind of like you understand, what the hell is he talking about? And there were even some black scholars, literary scholars, who said, you know, this isn't a good idea at all. They said, you know why this isn't a good idea? Because not only are you deleting the positive things about the book, you're deleting the negative things. In other words, you're actually censoring not only are you censoring the positive historical aspects of this historical book, but also the negative historical aspects. You see, censorship goes both ways. Censorship, you're whitewashing history, see? You're whitewashing something. And when you censor, especially history, and see, really, Huckleberry Finn is really written a book of its time, see? You're not only censoring the things you find agreeable, but you're also censoring the things you find objectionable about that time in history. And so it's just completely whitewashed, see? And so nobody even knows that there was any kind of bigotry, toward anyone, right? It's both, see? So now there's still a lot of censorship by religious conservatives, but so much more censorship by secular liberals. But it's the same thing, isn't it? And yet this is so much more dangerous because these secular liberals, they've just got so much more influence than religious conservatives ever had. And power. And even, representatives in our federal government, these people are among them. How many religious conservatives are really in our federal government? Not nearly as many as secular liberals. But it's the same thing either way, and we all suffer because of it, don't we? Now, you can find so much of this stuff on the internet. That's what I did. And, this is something I wanted to really point out. Americans have never been as ignorant as they are now. I'm sorry, but that's just a fact. This is what I see. Americans have never been as ignorant as they are now. Ignorance doesn't mean lack of intelligence. Ignorance just means lack of knowledge, see. That's what I mean, ignorant. It doesn't mean, lacking intelligence. Americans are as intelligent as they've ever been. But they're more ignorant than ever. And here is the irony. The irony is that Americans have more access to knowledge than ever before because of the internet. And because books, largely because of the internet, are so much more readily available. You can even self-publish now. You couldn't do that before. You can even self-publish, like this Alison Weir did. See? Isn't this ironic? And why is this? We have this incredible, the most incredible, as much as I hate the digital age, as much as I hate digital age technology, I have to admit the internet itself is arguably the most useful research tool ever devised. I use it all the time. I get on there, I use Google all the time. Most of the time when I'm on the internet, I'm either writing something or I'm finding out something. But just for fun, I'm going to learn something I want. I see this really, really hot actress in a movie. I get her name. Okay, I want to see more pictures of this really hot actress, usually from a time, usually from the 50s or 40s or before that. Really hot. Women were really just voluptuous back then, like voluptuous women. But anyway, I'm old school. I'm old school, as they say. Old school, very much old school. But anyway, I'll see this picture. So I want to see more pictures of her. So I put her name in there. And then I look, images, Google. And then I go and I take a look at that. I've even posted a lot of these on my own blog. They're just beautiful women I'd never even heard of before. Yeah. I hear the lyrics to a song that I like. And I hear it somewhere, and I want to get that song. Well, I don't have an iPod, so I can just get a CD of it, I'll get that on Amazon. But let me first find out what that song is. Usually the song, of course, again, is an old song from the 80s or before, I get hear the lyrics, and then I just type in Google. You can do this all the time. You can just type in some lyrics and get the whole song. And there was one that I got a while back, a CD of this a 1980s song, Destination Unknown. And I'd remembered hearing that when I was a kid, but I didn't remember exactly who sang it or anything like that. Kept hearing Destination Unknown, but I couldn't make out the lyrics. And finally I could make out the lyrics at this restaurant or get the sandwiches. and it plays 80s music and all. Got the lyrics, just typed them in. Something, something, something. I remember the lyrics. Destination unknown. Wham! There it comes. Group. I forget the name of the group, but I actually, of course, I got the CD. I got it now. And Destination. All right, listen to that over and over. Missing Persons. That was the group. Missing Persons. Another one is Words. What are words for? When no one listens anymore, right? 1980s, I do that all the time. I've gotten so much music through Amazon because, I heard the lyrics to a song. I want this song. Type in Google, get it like that. Google is, man, this is incredible. This internet. An incredible research tool. But what are most Americans doing on the internet? They're not looking up anything else. No, what are they doing? They're talking with their Facebook friends. They're playing video games. That's all they're doing. And especially with these mobile devices now, they're just sending tweets and all this stuff. It's all just social media and it's all just playing games. You're not learning anything. Isn't that a shame? You got this incredible research tool and you're not even learning it. And so as a result, most Americans are more ignorant than they've ever been. I cannot emphasize enough how useful the internet is as a tool for research. You used to have to go into the library and find all these books. Now you can go online and find all this stuff. And this is, this whole, all of this stuff is going on. All of this literally, this cultural genocide of the American South, this posthumous extermination of the Confederate States of America that is destructive as hell to the United States of America is all because of ignorance. Literally, ignorance. People don't even know what the flag is about. They don't even know what the Confederate States was. They don't know anything about it except what they hear on Facebook. That's not knowledge. That's just what you hear. We look to celebrities these days for all our information. That's part of the problem too. This is totally celebrity. We look to people like Oprah Winfrey. We look to the women on The View and all this stuff. We look to Donald Trump. We look to Hillary Clinton. We look to Al Gore. For the most part, these people are just celebrities. They're experts in acting. Hillary Clinton is arguably an expert in law, and she has some expertise in politics. Donald Trump has no expertise, probably has some expertise in business, although it's kind of bad business, irresponsible, and these women on The View, a lot of them are actors, they're experts in acting, but Oprah Winfrey is an extremely good actress, she is an expert in acting. Is she an expert in all this? I said no. See, none of these people are. These celebrities, it's all about celebrity. We listen, even Al Gore, he's like the spokesman for global warming. What does Al Gore know about global warming? Nothing. Al Gore is a politician. He was a lawyer too. He knows a lot about politics. He knows a lot about. He doesn't know a damn thing about climatology or meteorology. Not a damn thing. Yeah, there's something going on with the weather. I think it's just natural climate change. I've actually listened to actual scientists saying that there's really no evidence that this is global warming that we human beings are causing. Because I've actually listened to scientists, in this case from National Public Radio. But this is a scientist, this is a climatologist. Is Al Gore a climatologist? No. Is he a scientist? No. So he's really a celebrity, isn't he? And that's all it's about anymore. Advertisers use this all the time. They have people endorsing products. They've been doing this forever. Since advertising on television, they have people endorsing products who are just really great actors who know nothing about these products. They know this. They use this. It's a human tendency. And see, what it's about is who's right and not what is right. Remember I was telling you before, may have mentioned before, this is the most important thing I've ever read. It's written by Zig Ziglar, motivational speaker. Fair play, justice seeks what is right, not who is right. Well, so does truth. See, truth does not seek who is right. Truth seeks what is right. See, truth seeks what is right, not who is right. See, that's what truth seeks. So justice and truth, they don't seek who is right. They seek what is right. Yeah. It's not who says something, it's what the facts actually are. Yeah. We've got to start listening to people who are actually experts and not just celebrities, right? And even those who are experts on something, we expect them to be experts on everything. It doesn't work that way. Nobody is an expert on everything. I'm certainly not. And I'll say this, and I've been meaning to say this a long time. You know, I'm giving you all this information because nobody else is. That's why. You know. I just felt that, you know, somebody had to tell to tell the people of Pensacola what's wrong with these 5 flags displays, because nobody was doing it. People who even knew more than I was, like John Appleyard, were not saying anything. So somebody had to do it, and that's why I'm doing this. Because if I don't do it, nobody will, right? Why do I care about, you know, my sister Kathy one time asked me, well, you know, you're not an Arab, you're not a Muslim, why do you care about Palestinian Arabs, you know? I said, somebody has to. Somebody has to. See, I care about a lot of things. A lot of things matter to me. You know, I'm against, as I mentioned, I'm against unnecessary abortion. And of course, most abortion is unnecessary. But so are millions of other people. So I don't really have to focus on that too much because I have a lot of help, see. I'm against state lotteries. I'm against these big casinos. I'm not against the gamblers. See, state lotteries is nothing but gambling. It's just nothing but gambling. It's the same thing. No, I'm not against the gamblers. I'm against these states and these big, you know, casino operators that take advantage of these people, these poor people. They even call state lotteries a tax on the poor, and that's exactly what they are. See, I'm against that. But so are millions of other people, see. There are a lot of things that I stand for and millions of other people stand for. So I have help there. The things I concentrate on are things that matter just as much, and I know they do, but that nobody else stands for, see. I wrote this back in January 17 of this year. Now, I really don't want to come across as presumptuous with this, and I hope I don't come across that way. But I entitled this, What I Expect of My Fellow Pensacolians. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a harsh way like, oh, I demand that you do this. No, it's just what I expect of you, see. And again, it's a little bit dated because it was written on January 17, 2016 on my blog. What I expect of my fellow Pensacolians. 12,500 people attended the Donald Trump rally here in Pensacola, Florida the other day. Of course, some of the attendees were not supporters of Donald Trump, but most of them were. So many Pensacolians get all fired up over Donald Trump. Countless Pensacolians watched the National Collegiate Playoff game between Alabama and Clemson, praying to God that the Alabama Crimson Tide would win yet another national championship. Many of these Bama fans were not affiliated with the University of Alabama in any way. Indeed, were not even from the state of Alabama, as I am. So many Pensacolians get all fired up over the University of Alabama's football team. A few years ago, Pensacola's own Blue Angels were grounded. This infuriated Pensacola residents, so much so that the Navy decided to unground the Blue Angels, eventually, yeah. And I still see this bumper sticker on vehicles here on a regular basis. Ground Air Force One, not our Blue Angels. So many Pensacolians get all fired up over the Blue Angels. Last year, the mayor of Pensacola had the first Confederate flag removed from all historical flags displays on city property. Then the Escambia County Commission seconded the mayor's decision, proposing never again to fly any design of the Confederate flag anywhere in Escambia County, Florida, and replacing the first Confederate flag with the state flag of Florida in all 5 flags displays. The mayor of Pensacola and the Escambia County Commission committed an act of government censorship, not only of American history, but of Pensacola history. And this government censorship still goes on. The first Confederate flag has not been restored to its rightful place among the flags of Pensacola's history and heritage, but the other flags, each of which represents a nation or state that enslaved African Americans before the Confederate States of America even existed, remain in place in the 5 flags displays. Yet almost no Pensacolians get all fired up about this local government censorship of American history and Pensacola history. And every day in Greater Pensacola, drivers engage in willful, distracted driving by using their mobile devices while driving, endangering the lives of everyone around them. And nothing is done to stop this reckless practice, this total disregard for human life, because the state government of Florida refuses to pass any laws to stop it. Yet almost no Pensacolians get all fired up about this willful, distracted driving, this total disregard for human life that is slaughtering people every single day. I don't expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing against our federal government's support of the Zionist state, Israel, though I would appreciate it. I don't expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing for the rights of Native Americans, though I would appreciate it. I don't expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing against American corporations outsourcing of American jobs to foreign countries, though I would appreciate it. I don't expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing for the election of an independent President of the United States, though I would appreciate it. But I expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing against this local government censorship of the first Confederate flag, this local government censorship of American history and Pensacola history. And I expect my fellow Pensacolians to support me in my standing against this usage of mobile devices while driving, this total disregard for human life, and the Florida government's refusal to enact any laws to stop it. I have some information here. I can contact the Escambia County Board of County Commissioners. This is a letter to the editor, as I've read before. Sent copies to Ashton Hayward and Doug Underhill. Neither one responded, even though I asked for them to respond. That was back in July last year. Now, as I've mentioned before, you don't have to do anything about this. You can just let it go, but I tell you what, I promise, you let this go, you don't stand up against this. Start standing up against it here. They've already begun. State and local governments had already begun destroying Confederate memorials in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this will continue unless we stand up against this censorship of flags here, see. Because this is all together, see. This is a process. It's like a domino effect, see. And, you know, I would really appreciate it if you, as an Escambia County resident, would contact the Escambia County Commissioners and say, look, why don't you put that first Confederate flag back where it was? Or just do away with these 5 flags this place. You put the U.S. flag, you know, there. That's the current government. But what's the point in having these displays at all? You know, just have the American flag there. What's the point in having these 5 flags displayed if you take out the first Confederate flag, we're not talking about the battle flag, the first Confederate flag, you leave those other flags up there, and replace it with the state flag of Florida, Florida never having been a nation, and all of these other, you know, countries engaging in slavery and all this, you know, before the Confederate States of America ever even existed. Or at least, if nothing else, just ask them, let us vote on it. Let us vote on it. Hey? Let us vote on it. Let us decide. Who the hell was Mayor Ashton Hayward to just remove that flag without asking us? Or rather, I don't live inside the city, but the residents of the city of Pensacola, what they wanted. And who the hell were the members of the Escambia County Commission to give in to the demands of this one person, Diane Crummell, this Democrat, you know, just totally political here. I understand the flags are down, but I want to make that permanent. I don't want any chance of those flags going up again. One person demanded that of the Escambia County Commission, and the entire 5-member board of the Escambia County Commission, she brought them to their knees, where they still remain. Now, who the hell were they? They had the power to say, look, we're not going to let you tell us what to do. We're going to let the people of Escambia County decide this. No, they just did this without asking the residents of Escambia County. See, you know, as much as I dislike Diane Crummell, you know, I'm not blaming her so much as I'm blaming these people. Because like I said, this, you know, it's mostly Democrats who are pushing for this, you know, censorship of the Confederate flag, but it's Republicans who are giving in to them all over the South. Just to dodge the issue of gun regulation. To fool you. Infringing our freedom of speech. Now, the Escambia County Board of County Commissioners is right here. Commissioner Wilson Robertson, District 1. Commissioner Doug Underhill, District 2, that's my district. Commissioner Luman May, District 3. Commissioner Grover C. Robinson IV, District 4. He's the chairman. Commissioner Wilson Robertson is the vice chairman. Commissioner Stephen Berry, District 5. Now, the easiest way to do this if you're a resident of Escambia, and I'll tell you something else, you don't have to be a resident of Escambia County to contact these people. You can live anywhere in the world and contact these people, and I encourage you to. I mean, hell, I mean, you know, why don't you ask these people? And you're welcome to, by all means. Hey, at least let these people vote on it here. See, you don't have to be a resident of Escambia County, Florida, to contact these people and just, give them your opinion on it. And best of all, especially if you don't live in the county of Escambia County, ask them, hey, let those people vote on it. Let them decide. Okay? And if you just Google, I just Googled Escambia County Commission to get these. It takes you right to their webpage, and each of these names is highlighted here, and you can just click on each of these names, whichever district they're under, and you can contact them. It's got all the contact information there. Just type in Escambia County. Now keep in mind that there's also an Escambia County, Alabama. So if you see Escambia County, Alabama, just ignore that. This is Escambia.
That's too small. We can't see that.
Oh, okay. This is Escambia County Commission, Florida. Okay. So just put in Escambia County, Florida Commission or County Commission. Escambia County Board of County Commissioners. Look under there. You get this information. Doug Underhill, his district from District 2, his office phone is area code 850-595-4920. His email address is district2@myescambia.com. Contact your commissioner there. Now, I don't think the mayor can do anything anymore about it. You know, Mayor Ashton Hayward started this. And I don't think he can do anything about this, but I wouldn't mind a bit if you contacted him, and I wouldn't mind a bit if you told him, who the hell do you think you are? You just decided for the people, the residents of this city, you're going to censor their history without asking them anything? Who the hell do you think you are, Mayor? Huh? You can do that. Bug the mayor a little bit. Maybe if you bug the mayor, maybe he'll bug the Escambia County Commission. Man, I've got these people bothering me about this. Why don't y'all do something about it? Get these people off my back. Get them, leave me alone. Mayor Ashton Hayward's phone number is area code 850-435-1626. That's his office number. I'm not talking about home numbers. And I don't have his email address on here, but his name, Ashton Hayward, Mayor of Pensacola, Florida. I'm going to close with this. Once again, this is Scott Mayo, a resident of Greater Pensacola, actually a resident of Escambia County, Florida. And this is about, the whole presentation is urging Escambia County residents to contact the Escambia County Commission members to let them know we want to decide what is done with these 5 flags displays here in Pensacola. But this is largely for others all over the South too. All over the South, state and local governments are censoring Confederate flags of every design. In my hometown in Mobile, not only has the Confederate flag, actually in this case the 3rd Confederate flag, been removed from the 6 flags displays there, because Alabama was actually a nation at one time, displays there, but they've actually removed any semblance of the Confederate flag from the state seal. I mean the city seal. And there's actually a motion, again, this is just by Democrats, pushed toward the state legislature of Florida to remove any semblance of the Confederate States of America, any emblem of the Confederate States of America from the entire state. And I've contacted my state legislatures, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Say, no way, man. Let us decide this. Who the hell are you who the hell are you to censor history for adults like us, huh? Who the hell are you? You're not our parents. You're a bunch of politicians. Who the hell are you to tell us, what we can see or not? But I encourage all Southerners who see this, all Southern Americans, do the same. Don't let these state and local governments, because it doesn't make any difference. These state and local governments are committing cultural genocide against the South. And they're destroying, they're posthumously exterminating the Confederate States of America. This is destructive as hell to the United States of America. This is not what America is about at all. Not at all. A flag is a piece of cloth that says something. It is a piece of cloth that speaks. The Confederate battle flag, the Southern Cross, says this is the Confederate side of the battlefield, and that is all it was designed to say. The first Confederate flag, the Stars and Bars, the second Confederate flag, the Stainless Banner, and the third Confederate flag, the Bloodstained Banner, say, this is the Confederate States of America, and that is all they were designed to say. Because the Confederate flag, all four designs, is a piece of cloth that says something, a piece of cloth that speaks, it is representative of speech itself. Thus, an infringement on the Confederate flag is an infringement on our right to freedom of speech. Dylann Roof abused our right to keep and bear arms and murdered 9 people. Yet the Confederate flag has been censored, as if the Confederate flag is to blame for this mass shooting. Because our right to keep and bear arms was abused, our right to freedom of speech has been infringed. Islam is a religion. Because Islam is a religion, it is representative of religion itself. Thus, an infringement on Islam is an infringement on our right to freedom of religion. Syed Rizwan Farouk and Tashfeen Malik abused our right to keep and bear arms and murdered 14 people. Yet Islam has been scrutinized as if Islam is to blame for this mass shooting. Muslims, adherents of Islam, have been ostracized, persecuted, and in some cases murdered. Because our right to keep and bear arms was abused, our right to freedom of religion has been infringed. This is so important. I can't emphasize this part enough. So what, you say? The Confederate flag is not my flag? An infringement on it is not an infringement on my right to freedom of speech. Guess what? Your flag will be next. So what, you say? Islam is not my religion. An infringement on it is not an infringement on my right to freedom of religion. Guess what? Your religion will be next. A bizarre kind of bargaining is going on here. Americans are saying, you can infringe on our right to freedom of speech as long as you don't even question our right to keep and bear arms. Americans are saying, you can infringe on our right to freedom of religion as long as you don't even question our right to keep and bear arms. But if we lose our right to freedom of speech, our right to freedom of religion, and every other right guaranteed us in our Bill of Rights by overzealously guarding our right to keep and bear arms and leaving every other right wide open to infringement, what good will our right to keep and bear arms be to us? Likewise, our federal government is as potentially dangerous to every right guaranteed us in our Bill of Rights as our state and local governments are. Let's see here. Oh, here we are. Nah. But if we lose our right to freedom of speech, our right to freedom of religion, and every other right guaranteed us in our Bill of Rights by overzealously guarding against infringement of these rights by our federal government and leaving them wide open to infringement by our state and local governments, what difference will it make?